Call to order, councillors. I think we're still missing one. Good morning, everyone. And before we begin, respectfully, could you all please turn off your mobile phones and your other devices, please be turned to silent. Welcome, community members, visitors, guests, media representatives. Again, it's good to see community members attending. This is an open council meeting for the public to observe council in its decision-making process. It is a formal meeting, not a public meeting, and it is formal in its process, but open to the public to observe council in its decision-making. As always, please, anyone in attendance, it is expected all present are treated with respect and courtesy. This especially includes remaining silent during public forum and presentation items, and importantly, whilst council is in session and councillors are concentrating on the discussion and decision at hand. Councillors, I remind no one in this room has parliamentary privilege. Any debate, remarks or gallery interactions need to keep this in mind. The code of meeting practice for live streaming is for me to inform all present that council permits the electronic recording and broadcast of the proceedings of meetings of council, which are open to the public. Your attendance at this meeting is taken as consent to the possibility that your image and or voice may be recorded and broadcast to the public. Agenda items and recommendations before council will be displayed on the screen behind me. Councillors, today we have one public forum speaker, Mr. Lex Tall, on item 13.2 planning proposal, housekeeping, and a presentation from our auditors, Mr. Jeff O'Dwyer. Councillors, before we start, I'd like to welcome the students and teachers from St. Joseph's Primary. I am Councillor Ashley Williams, the Deputy Mayor of Kempsey Shire Council and the chairperson of this meeting today. Before we resume the meeting, I'd like to introduce the people sitting at the council table and explain what we're up to. On these two sides of the tables, we have 7, or is 6 at the moment, usually 8 councillors who have been elected by the people of the Valley to represent them and make decisions on their behalf. I will now let the councillors introduce themselves. On our left.
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually the best councillor here today, Anthony Parson.
Morning, students. I'm Sue McGinn. I'm a dairy farmer from Downriver.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Leo Horval. In my past life, I was a school principal, so I'll be watching you closely.
Good morning, boys and girls and teachers. My name is Councillor Dean Saul, and I own and operate the Bus Stop Cafe in Kempsey.
Good morning, St Joseph's. I'm Councillor Anna Shields. Nice to see you all here today.
Councillor Mark Baxter, teacher at Kempsey High. Welcome.
Thank you, councillors. We just have Councillor Bruce Morris. I'll let him introduce himself to all of you.
Sorry, I'm late, but it took 15 minutes to get to the bridge for Middleton Street. It only takes me less than
Oh, we need a second crossing.
Okay, well, we have somebody different sitting in the chair as well, and that's our Mayor Liz Campbell. She's away at the moment, so. But sitting to me on my right is the General Manager of Council, Mr. Craig Milburn. Mr. Milburn looks after all the staff and makes sure that what the councillors decide to do at the council meetings gets done. We also have directors, Mr. Stephen Mitchell, Director of Corporate, and Mr. Robert Fish, Director of Operations, who provide advice on important things we may need to make decisions and assist other staff with making the meeting run smoothly. Councillors will be debating and voting on the recommendations before council. Welcome again, and I hope you enjoy your day today. Councillors, before we start, as you're aware, this is only my second meeting as chair of council, so if I'm a little slow or asking for advice, please bear with me. Also, please don't forget to use your lights and microphones. The only other thing is that we had some confusion last meeting as to what I would be referred to as chair. We've got all sorts of different things, but Mr. Chair will be appropriate. Thanks. Councillors, will begin the traditional way with the opening prayer. Dear Lord, help us in our deliberations today so that our decisions will be for the greater good of the whole of the Kempsey Shire. Amen. Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Dunghutti people. We have one apology today, that's Councillor Liz Campbell. All in favour of... That's carried. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, Mr. Chairperson. I would like to declare I have an interest in 15.3. It's a non-pecuniary, non-significant interest, as I am a patron of the MACLEAY Historical Society.
Councillor Morris?
Mr. Chairman, item 1310, I take advice from the General Manager as to whether I should declare I believe it is reasonable to declare a non-significant non-pecuniary interest in as much as I am an applicant for a complying development certificate, which is listed in the report. The report is to be noted only. The work has actually already been completed and I have got a final certificate approved for the work. So that would be an appropriate declaration? Would be.
Mr. Chair. I'd still be seeking advice from the Chair. As you know, I work in the construction business, and on item number 13.1, development approvals and construction certificates, I happen to know most of those clients. On a business and friendly basis. So.
But it's for noting.
I know, but Mr. General Manager, I thought about this recently because I'm in the construction industry. That I have had people pointing out to me that I had something possibly to do with the construction trade being on the. This goes back to the Mayfair Plaza, not the Mayfair Plaza, the cinema building. So I look for your advice on this.
Through Mr. Chair, with any declarations of interest, it comes down to the individual responsibility of the councillors to actually make that final call. We can provide advice. The report is simply for noting. There's no decision. These DAs have actually all been approved.
Yep.
I wouldn't see any conflict at this stage, other than potentially, as Councillor Morris did, declaring a non-significant, non-pecuniary. Should someone want to move an amendment and they start getting the debate, you might want to change that declaration. But with it being just purely for noting, sorry, I think you meant 1310.
Yeah,
1310. Is that the one you meant?
1310.
1310. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, given that it's just for noting, but if someone moved an amendment, then, but it's up to each individual councillor to make their own decision.
Yep.
Mr. Chair?
I'm happy with that.
No, just a technical question. If there is a significant interest and that motion is within the consensus motion, would that person have to withdraw for the whole consensus motion voting?
Yes. It should
unless it
probably
was
be pulled out.
withdrawn.
It should be removed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered that. Assessment of listed items for confidential consideration.
Move that way.
Second that.
Moved Councillor McGinn, seconded Councillor Saul.
I've got concerns with one of the reports. I believe that the majority of the information is in that report should be put on the public record, and that's the second report in regard to the audit at the airport. All of the costings and so forth that are in there are available in in previous open council reports. There is, if any, very limited commercial in confidence information, which is the reason it's been given for that to be put in there. I would like to see that brought into open council with the commercial in confidence sections redacted, or be deferred and brought back to council at the December meeting with an open report with the commercial in confidence components, which are quite minimal, redacted, or put in a confidential appendix.
I'll let the Director or General Manager comment on that.
Yeah, Director.
Yep. Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. That paper was put in as confidential because there's still certain negotiations that are undergoing. So the decision was made that we didn't want to prejudice those negotiations and where they're up to. There's also other items that relate to other parties that haven't been advised of the certain status of this, which may impact on our ability in relation to funding, etc. And so that was why this decision was made to put it as confidential, given where we are in terms of the negotiations and advising those key stakeholders.
In addition to that, there's actually potential legal proceedings. So there was a range of factors that actually led to us putting that into confidential at this point in time.
But the reason that's been given to being confidential does not include those matters.
It's highlighted the commercial in confidence, and there's a range of commercial in confidence items in there.
Well, regardless of that, if I get a second, I'll move an amendment that report be deferred, with it being brought back to open council at the December meeting with the commercial in confidence information redacted.
I'll second that motion.
I want that because I believe there's a lot of information in it that needs to be put on the public record.
So and we have a seconder. Councillor Morris, would you like to speak to your amendment?
I believe that there's a lot of information in that report that should be on the public record. We should be open and transparent. If there were faults made in the past, we shouldn't be hiding them in a confidential report. We should be open and transparent to the community.
Is there any debate? Councillor Hall?
Yes, Mr Chair, I'd support the amendment because I believe we are necessarily in need to be open and transparent about the financing of projects undertaken by Kempsey Council. And if there are issues, the community should know about it. That's who we represent. And if there are items that need to be kept in confidential, that could be a separate report, and that will be dealt with in the confidential section. But the necessary openness and transparency should go to all those items that don't need to be in confidential.
A question, Mr Chairman.
Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I think the GM just made a comment about negotiations and other matters. Are we going to limit ourselves if we do bring this in the open forum?
General Manager.
If council were to defer this and ask for a report in the open section of the meeting next month, we would be very careful about what we disclose there, not to prejudice any sort of commercial in confidence negotiations or any potential legal proceedings. So it would be a limited report that would come to council in the open.
I'll be
Councillor Patterson.
I'll be voting against.
Mr Chair, the fact that it's under negotiation was a resolution of the last council meeting. So how can that be considered commercial in confidence? The resolution of an open council meeting at the last council meeting.
Mr Chair, the details of the negotiations are commercial in confidence.
Okay. There's no right of reply, Councillor. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Oh, I'll put the amendment, sorry. All in favour? All against? The amendment's lost. The motion, the original motion, is now what we're voting on, councillors. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? That's carried. We'll go to confirmation of minutes.
Mr Chair, I'd like to move an amendment, please.
Councillor Hall.
I've emailed it through to our technical experts over there. That could be put up, please. My amendment is first add a new section, the preamble, and state the chairperson inform those in attendance that the meeting is being webcast and that those in attendance should refrain from making any defamatory statements. Add to 8.2. Councillor Horval was asking a question of Mr Chris Mulcahy of Gowings, future plans to promote the cinema. Points of order were called by Councillors Patterson and McGinn before the question had been put. Councillor Patterson, quote, point of order, the project has already been put forward, Madam Mayor. Councillor McGinn, point of order, Madam Mayor, I think we are trying to get the decisions are made and we are proceeding as a council. The points of order were upheld by the Chair. A motion of dissent was moved by Councillor Horville. Councillor Horville spoke to his dissent, quote, "But we need to know that the cinema is going to be a success. For it to be a success, Madam Mayor, we need to have a plan, and Gowings should be on board to bring the people to appreciate the cinema and make sure that it is operating successfully." The chairperson spoke to her ruling. Quote, "The reason I called a point of order, and I think the reason why I upheld it, is that the presentation was Gowing Brothers will be speaking on Kempsey Cinema project. We are not here to debate whether we have the project or we don't. That has been debated, so I'll still rule the order of dissent and we will proceed." The chairperson put to the meeting that her ruling be upheld. The ruling was upheld for Councillor Campbell, Councillor McGinn, Councillor Williams, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Shields. Against, Councillor Horville, Councillor Saul, Councillor Morris. In item 15.1, motion put, not amendment put. That's my amendment.
Do we have a seconder? We need to deal with this one first. We just need to...
Second that.
Okay. Do you have any comment from...
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair. We've put up the actual minutes, which actually highlights how council records its minutes. It doesn't actually record the dialogue. It never has. No, and councils don't. And the Code of Meeting Practice is clear on that. The current minutes highlight the point of order that was called. It highlights it was upheld. It highlights the motion of dissent and the decision on that. That is what council has done, and it's Code of Meeting. It does not do what Councillor Horville is requesting to be put into the minutes. There's no in any items council has the debate that goes on and what people are saying are not put in there as quotations. It's simply the decisions that are recorded.
Madam, Mr Chair, could
Yes.
I speak, please? According to the minutes at the moment, the present ones that have been put up, a motion of dissent was moved by Councillor Horville, and for that motion of dissent were all those people and only 2 people against it. That's not what happened. As a point of order, there is no need for a seconder, and that's mentioned. I'm thinking that the motion of dissent was clear and it spelt out what was being dealt with by the question that I put. The Mayor did not take into account my dissent, but talked about reopening a debate, and there was no reopening of any debate. It was a very clear matter that I was asking what are the future plans of Kempsey or Gowings to promote the cinema, and I want it to be a success, and yet I was told that points of order were put up by 2 councillors, and I cannot discern in those points of order any of the points of order that were put to me by Councillor Campbell as Mayor when she and Councillor Baxter met together when we first started as councillors, what points of order were. And they contravene acts or regulations. What I was saying did not do that. Assaults or threatens, I did not do that. Moves unlawful motion, I was not moving a motion. Moves motion outside jurisdiction of council, I was asking a question. Insults or makes personal reflections or imputes improver motives to another council, I did not do that. Does anything inconsistent with maintaining order, I was not doing anything other than asking a question. Anything that is likely to bring council into contempt, I did not do anything like that. I was asking for a future plan from Gowings. So all the order of meeting items that Councillor Campbell gave me and gave Councillor myself
Sorry, Councillor Horval.
I'm just saying, finish up very quickly.
Thank you.
That were the points of order that could be made, and none of those fulfil the points of order. So I wanted to highlight that the point of order itself was put and carried incorrectly.
So what we need to do is we need to change the for and against.
On the motion of dissent.
On the motion of
the other
dissent.
way.
So that's the whole idea of this?
That's correct.
My original amendment still stands.
Okay, well, but is that totally, it's against our code of meeting practice? So it would...
Council, not just this council, councils across the state do not record the discussions between councillors in their minutes. They record the decisions of council.
Okay.
Could I amend my amendment, Mr. Chairperson? Redact all of the quotes, please, and have a new amendment, and just have that the rulings was upheld, the ruling was upheld, for and against, and put into perspective that I was asking a question and hadn't completed the question when points of order were made. So if you redact all the things that were said, then that will be fine.
Okay, Councillor, so we have the point of order was upheld by the Chair. We flip around the for and against, and that's exactly what you're asking. Okay. So we don't need, we need the preamble still?
I voted,
Yeah, we need the preamble.
I voted against the motion, or for the motion of dissent.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask that we have it on the screen before we agree to anything?
Mr. Chairperson, through you to the General Manager, by redacting the quotes, that won't, my amendment then will not be appearing as I put it in the minutes. But that's, it won't happen.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a comment to fill in the space of time?
Just 1 second.
I voted the other way, Daniel. I voted the other way.
Councillor, just 1 second, Councillor McGinn. We've got another amendment or some adjustments over there, so we'll go to Councillor Morris.
Some other comments, but in regard to this, can I just ask that we make some further small changes to this? Because when you read it, there's a presentation, conducted a presentation on update, which isn't quite correct English, but that doesn't matter. But then a point of order was called by Councillor Pattersons and McGinn. There should be some context as to what that point of order was about. Was that about the presentation by Chris? No, there should be a point of order was called by Councillor Patterson and McGinn in regard to a question being asked by Councillor Horval. There should be some context to it, because in 2 or 3 years' time when somebody reads that, what is that going to mean? What was the point of order called on?
And that was my original amendment. I actually said the Councillor Horval was asking a question of Mr. Chris Mulcahy on Gowing's future plans to promote the cinema. That's the context. Then the points of order were called. In my questioning,
I agree that we don't need, that we shouldn't have the commentary of the debate, but I believe there should be some context so that it makes sense when somebody reads it in 6 months' time or in 12 months' time.
Debating, let's get some words there. And a point of order was called by Councillors Patterson and McGinn in relation to... Okay, thank you.
It's points of order. Each of them had separate ones.
Have we got Councillor McGinn first?
I'd like to make a comment that's sort of well, it is related to this. when we discuss our code of meeting conduct, I suggest that we make sure that any adjustments to the minutes are made prior to the meeting. This is an absolute ridiculous and waste of time. It is so inefficient to be working through minutes word by word in an open council meeting when we're meant to be making decisions here for the benefit of the community. We have a meeting which is a briefing with the General Manager the night before. Why ever these items were not brought up the night before so that we could discuss and work through words when there is the appropriate time to do it. That is the appropriate process. We need to get that documented into our code of conduct. This is an absolute waste of valuable time and management time working through minutes word by word in this format.
Thank you.
Just on...
Just one
I think
second.
it's captured what Councillor Hall was saying.
Is that correct, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
Councillor Baxter?
Just on Councillor Shields' point, this obsession with getting all the details down, I thought we went through this whole rigmarole. The meeting.
Councillor, thank you. Thank you.
Video. Everything's on tape.
Councillor. Councillor Morris?
They're just minor typographical errors. On page 6, twice we've got moved by, or once we got moved by Morris and moved by Horville, instead of moved by Councillor Morris and Councillor Horville. Again, on page 6, we got moved by Patterson and seconded by Saul, with no councillor before it. Again, that happens on page 7. On page 17, I would ask that we provide some clarity in relation to item 13.7. I know when I read it, I had to reread it because it says that an amendment was moved, and I know it's standard that we do not list when a motion is carried. But in this case, we had an amendment that was moved, no mention that it was carried except for reading the fact that there were 5 votes to 4, and unfortunately the against line is a little bit longer than the for line, so you have to really look at it closely. And then there's no comment as to, it just says the motion was put. I honestly believe under those circumstances, when it's so close, there should be a comment, say that the amendment became the motion, and then the motion was put to the meeting. Because there is, you have to read it a couple of times to realise what the actual
separate amendment?
Motion was.
It's all part.
There was the mention of the amendment was put, which should have been the motion was put, which is on 15.1, which is on page 18. And I actually asked 2 questions. There's only one of them recorded in the councillor questions, and yet there are 2 that appear with answers in the agenda to this meeting. So clearly my first question should have been added to the minutes.
Okay.
Move we put the amendment and move on.
I'll just make sure it's up there to how it should be.
Can I just say something?
Sure can.
I know some of this is frustrating for councillors. However, it is really important we do get these right. So, yeah, it is tedious at times, but it is important that the minutes are accurate. So, yeah, we will get there. Yeah, I know, as an example, Councillor Morris generally is very good in getting some of this stuff to us earlier, but I know he's been tied up with other things personally, and he couldn't.
Come out late and in a way that I couldn't easily read it, and I didn't read it until the last couple of days.
And we certainly need to watch the quality of what we're producing in terms of the minutes as well, and the recording will help that.
So currently this is our practice, and what we need to make sure going forward is that we change that when we look at it in a couple of months' time. So with those changes, I put the motion.
The amendment?
The amendment, sorry. All in favour? Oh, sorry, Count.
Point of order. I moved
Yeah,
the
it's actually
motion,
the
so it's
motion.
not an amendment.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it is
this
the
is the
motion,
motion.
yes.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I support it.
So move it. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We have no citizenship ceremonies today. We do have a public forum speaker, Mr. Lex Tall. He'll be speaking on 13.2, the planning proposal. Welcome, Lex. Just before you start, we'll remind you that We have the timer on the screen. I don't have the notes that Liz would normally read out, but I'm sure you know what you're doing, and please keep to topic if you can. And you'll see the timer run out there. There is an option for an extension of time, but that's up to the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking to you today as the Director of TB Holdings Proprietary Limited, who are the owners of Lot 36 in Deposited Plan 1214499 in Bell O'Connor Street, which is part of the land subject to your item 13.2 today. The Part 3A development approval held by Malbec included land of which we are now the owner, and unfortunately we weren't aware of your 13.2 item until Sunday the 18th of November. So when we became aware that you were proposing something that might impact our land, we spoke immediately on Monday morning to the New South Wales Department of Planning, and after consultation with the New South Wales Department of Planning, we emailed to Director Fish our concerns with the proposals that currently stands. Now, if it were possible, I'd like to table that email, so hopefully Director Fish can provide copies that form part of the subsequent minutes. But I'll read now directly from that email, which is an email from our town planner, and the main objection in summary is that you're limiting the request to New South Wales Planning to exclude our land from that request. But I'll read now, as I said, from Keely Hunter, Town Planner, the email sent to Robert Fish yesterday. The purpose of this submission is to request that the area of land to be excluded from the urban release area boundary be revised to include all of the Part 3A project approval area. An application to modify the project approval MP 080167 Malbec Southwest Rocks Proprietary Limited, Modification 2, is in the final stages of assessment with draft consent conditions issued by New South Wales Planning. The main outcome of Modification 2 is the separation of stages 5 and 6, that being our Lot 36, from stages 1 to 4, being the Malbec part of the Part 3A approval area, including new road access to enable stages 5 and 6 to be completed independently of stages 1 to 4 of the project approval. There's a plan attached to the document to make it more easily explainable. As stated in the report to Council, the justification for the exclusion of Stage 1 from the URA area is that Clause 6.3 of Kempsey LEP prevents development within the urban release area until a development control plan that guides a range of environmental matters is prepared, advertised and adopted. Until this time, DAs for new dwellings within the approved subdivision area cannot be considered by Council. The conundrum equally affects future approvals for housing within all of the Part 3A project area, including Stage 5 and 6, which is our land. Council has not prepared a development control plan for the saltwater URA that meets the requirements of Clause 6.3 of the LEP. The current development control plan, Chapter D2, Saltwater Precinct Southwest Rocks, only sets out the requirements for the preparation of a master plan for land in the saltwater URA. This chapter was not in force at the time that the Part 3A project approval was obtained. As stated in the report to Council, the way forward is to remove the portion of the URA mapped area that already has a Part 3A project approval from New South Wales Department of Planning. The justification for this is that the matters raised by Clause 6.3 have already been considered by New South Wales Planning in their assessment and determination of the Part 3A approval The justification applies equally to all of the Part 3A project approval area. There is no environmental management need for Council to prepare a DCP that covers Part 3A project approval areas. Such a DCP would merely resolve a planning conundrum over the Part 3A.
Excuse me. Move an extension by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Patterson. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you, Lex. You've got another 3 minutes.
There is therefore requested that the area to be excluded from the area boundary is consistent with all of the Part 3A project approval area as shown in a diagram attached to this document. It's the Part 3 area that's already on your 13.2, but it's the whole of the Part 3 area, not just the small part circled. It is respectfully requested that Council alter the map amendment of the housekeeping planning proposal as described in this email and as shown in the diagram. Thank you.
Any questions, councillors? Thank you, Lex. Councillor Horval?
Thank you for your presentation, Lex. I can tell you've confused me, but thank you. Would more time be appropriate for you to prepare to respond to this in writing to Council?
We have responded in writing to Council, but it was...
In more fully, and I'm saying...
I'm not sure we can go beyond what we've done.
Okay.
And a small comment in response. I understand that the Malbec development has been delayed, and they already have contracts that are in jeopardy because they have sunset clauses on them because of this problem. And normally I would have perhaps done something more in the meantime to more fully advise you, but it could be cause some severe economic difficulties to the Malbec project if the matter's delayed for any great length of time. I mean, literally sunset clauses are happening to them, I know.
Mr. Chairperson, through you, could I ask a question of Director Fish, please?
Sure can.
Could deferring this matter till the December Council meeting get councillors and the interested parties more time to address it?
Through the Chair, Councillor Horval, there's probably a number of matters really to consider in making that decision. The Malbec component of the development is under construction and is well progressed. The small area that represents within that urban release area is certainly believed that it can be part of the housekeeping planning proposal that you see today. To bring the larger area into it would require your basic reassessment of the planning proposal that's been done and would certainly unnecessarily delay the other parts of the planning proposal that you're considering today.
Councillor Shields?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again to Director Fish. So could we again apply for a subsequent gateway after this for the other sections?
Yeah. We've got questions for Mr. Tall, and if we want to ask those questions, we might ask a little later in the...
Okay. You're right.
Councillor Baxter?
Sorry, I do have a
sorry.
question
Yes,
for
go.
Mr. Tall. Thank you, Mr. Tall. Just to clarify, you're looking for the whole urban release area to be included rather than just the dashed section at this stage?
Well, the circle section doesn't include our land. We're quite advanced with the department in them issuing us with a separate DA to the Malbec DA, just simply hiving off our land from Malbec, in which it's envisaged that an initial 21 lots would be released, and that could be the problem with Director Fish, in that it's 21 lots is substantially more than I think about 8 lots that Malbec are after. But on the same token, if you go ahead on the basis you are at the moment, then of course you're disadvantaging our project because we have to wait then 3 or 6 months till any of our land then gets approved.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Morris?
Mr. Tall, a question. You indicated that you want all of 3A released. You said that your land is Part 5 and Part 6.
Yes, I'd be very happy if you just granted Part 5 and Part 6, but...
I suppose going on the back of the comment that was made by Director Fish, and trying to limit it so that there's not too much done because there are other issues that need to be addressed. If council was of a mind to consider to release or to include a component of your land, which would be preferable, Part 5 or Part 6?
Part 5.
So it would satisfy you more so if we could include 1A and 5 in this and then come back and do the appropriate studies and work to...
It would solve the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Toll. We will now have a short presentation from our auditors. Mr. Jeff O'Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to be here today to represent the Audit Office for the second year, and as I'm sure most of you would be aware, the Auditor General received the mandate to audit local government or local councils in October 2016. So this being the second year of the mandate, the Auditor General from 2017 onwards took 12 councils in-house to audit those and contracted out, if you like, the remaining 126 councils to 12 audit firms. From 2018-19 onwards, that's changing a little with 10 additional councils going back in-house to be audited by the Audit Office of New South Wales, and an open tender process which is being undertaken in stages with a view, obviously, of around that 120 councils continue to be provided, or audit services provided through audit service providers. In relation to Kempsey Council, I'm pleased to advise that TNR has been appointed the audit service provider for another 5 years, commencing from the 2019 audit. In terms of the 2017-18 financial statement audit, across the sector, there were 3 key areas of focus. Firstly, procurement practices and contract management. As councils would be aware, the majority of bad publicity and fraud can stem from this area. So across the sector, there's been a focus on identifying opportunities for councils to improve in that area. Valuation of infrastructure, property, plant and equipment, I think has been a focus in any local government audit from probably 2007, when the fair value accounting came to infrastructure valuations. Council's on a rolling 5-year rotation plan, if you like, in terms of revaluing the various classes of infrastructure assets on the balance sheet. This year, Council revalued operational land and buildings. Last year, water and sewer infrastructure was revalued. And controls over IT systems. Across the sector, we've been reviewing IT risks relevant to financial reporting processes particularly, including system access and security, monitoring of privileged user access, system software acquisition, etc., with a view of being able to provide insights to Council to improve their processes. The Auditor General reported the first local government report to Parliament in April, which was a challenging report, bringing together the results of 127 local council audits and 12 county councils, all of which were unique. But I think that report was able to provide insights, particularly around reporting, sustainability, asset management and governance and IT. There was also a very useful, I think, data visualisation tool which was released by the Audit Office, which enables councils to benchmark quite easily against other local councils or other councils in the state. Part of the Audit Office's or Auditor General's mandate, outside of financial statement audit, is performance audits, and the Audit Office tabled 3 performance audit reports during the year, one in relation to reporting on service delivery, fraud controls in local government, and shared services in local government were the 3 topics of those reports. So the first 3 audit reports were largely focused on the sector as a whole, but going forward, performance audits will be more targeted to specific issues or specific councils. And I guess in that regard, the Auditor General has released her work plan for the 2019 year, and also beyond that. There are 3 scheduled performance audits between now and 30 June 19, waste management being one of those, managing staff implications for amalgamated councils, and also the management of a selected council activity. So at the time of preparing this presentation, that hasn't been fully locked down in terms of what activity that will be, but it will be likely in the development application space. Post 30 June 19, I've noted there asset management in local government, cross-border issues, and rural water and sewerage fees and charges. I guess the message that I think the Audit Office would like passed on to management and councils, if there are any suggestions in terms of performance audit topics, they'd be more than happy to take those on board and give those due consideration. So, in terms of the 2018 financial statements, we've completed the audit of those, and we've issued unqualified audit opinions on Council's general and special purpose financial statements. The Office of Local Government's code sets out what needs to be covered in the report on the conduct of the audit, which I'll go through the highlights of that now for you in terms of the report you have in your agenda. So firstly, the income statement. The income statement reflects that Council's operating result for the year was some $62.5 million. And when we get to the explaining the reasons for that, you'll see why that's so high. The operating result before capital amounts, so before capital grants and contributions, was a deficit of some $2.8 million, which was an improvement on last year of $1 million. So in terms of the actual operating result then, some $62.1 million greater than last year, and fundamentally that is due to the grants and contributions provided for capital purposes increasing by over $61 million, and predominantly on the back of the non-cash dedication from the RMS of assets associated with the Old Pacific Highway. That totalled $58.8 million during the year. Council also received capital grants and contributions of $2.1 million in relation to the South Kempsey Village bypass. There are some other reasons for that increase. Grants and contributions provided for operating purposes increased by $2.8 million. Once again, largely that was due to contributions for the RMS for future maintenance on the dedicated portions of the Old Pacific Highway. There was $4.6 million provided in cash for that. That was partly offset by a reduction in the financial assistance grant of around $2.5 million. Councils will be aware that last year Council received 6 quarters worth of funding of financial assistance grant, whilst this year only 4 quarters were received. There were also increases in ordinary rates, as Council, a special general rate increase of 4% in the year. Annual charges for sewer services increased by $800,000 as well. This slide presents I guess a graph on the statement of cash flows. Council's cash and cash equivalents decreased by some $23 million during the year, but that was really a representation of a shift in the portfolio, as there were actually monies put into longer term deposits, which are not considered to be cash and cash equivalents. The next slide, I think, probably provides a better understanding of the cash and investments position of Council. You can see that actually cash and investments increased and was $50.1 million at 30 June 2008 compared to $41.9 the year before. But as you can see, a move from cash and cash equivalents to investments, which represent term deposits with greater than 3 months of duration. In terms of how that cash sits then in terms of its restriction, you can see that $32.8 million of cash is held in externally restricted form or for externally restricted amounts. There was an increase predominantly there in relation to the Water Augmentation Reserve and also an increase in the Foreshore Caravan Parks Reserve. And in terms of the balance, internal restrictions, some $13.8 million set aside for external restrictions. There was, I think, a $1.1 million increase in those restrictions during the year, and unrestricted cash increased by $2.1 million to $3.5 million, giving us a total of $50.1 million worth of cash at the end of the year. The financial statements, and particularly note 22 in the general purpose financial statements, and then also special schedule 7, provide performance indicators or performance ratios which are used to benchmark councils, and obviously were front of mind in relation to the fit for the future assessments from a few years ago. What I've, I guess, highlighted here by the black and the red colours is that for 5 of the ratios, 5 of the 7 that are reported, council meets the benchmark, the industry benchmark, and for 2, council doesn't. So I'll just run through those individually for you. Firstly, the operating performance ratio. So the operating performance ratio measures how well council contains its operating expenditure within operating revenue, with a benchmark of break even or greater than 0, if you like. Council has achieved, on a consolidated basis, a ratio of 3.15% for 2018, and you can see the general movement or the upward trend over the last 3 years, where we didn't meet it in 2016 and have now in 2017 and 18. I would highlight that both Water and Sewer Fund did not achieve that positive ratio, so council should continue to monitor the performance of those funds. The own source operating revenue ratio, which was one that I highlighted in the summary that council didn't meet, the benchmark is greater than 60%. As I alluded to earlier, council received significant non-cash contribution during the year in the form of parts of the old Pacific Highway. They come in as a capital contribution and have a massive impact, as you can see on this ratio. Without the impact of those non-cash dedications, council's ratio would have been similar to last year and above 60%. The unrestricted current ratio is a measure of, I guess, the council's ability to meet its short-term obligations. The benchmark set by the OLG is greater than 1.5. As you can see, council achieves the ratio. It's actually 2.51, which means council has $2.51 in liquid current assets for every dollar in current liabilities, and all funds have met that ratio. The debt service cover ratio measures the operating cash that council has to service its debt obligations. The benchmark here is greater than 2. You can see council's ratio has been improving and is 4.35. The improvement due to better operating results and lower debt service costs, and all funds once again achieve that greater than 2 industry benchmark. The rates and annual charges outstanding ratio assesses the impact of uncollected rates and annual charges on council's liquidity. The benchmark that's set for rural councils is to be less than 10% of rates and annual charges outstanding. So council has consistently achieved this industry benchmark. For the 2018 year, it's 6.10. All funds met that less than 10% ratio. Council's water fund was the highest at 9.21. Cash expenses cover ratio, a measure of liquidity. The industry benchmark here is to be greater than 3 months. Council well over that, and it comes in at 11.03. Council continues to improve its cash expenses cover ratio. Council has increased its cash reserves whilst maintaining expenditure levels, which has allowed that to occur. And the final ratio, and this is one that comes from Council's Special Schedule 7, which is unaudited. It's the Buildings and Infrastructure Renewals ratio, which assesses the rate at which buildings and infrastructure assets are being renewed against the rate at which they are depreciating, with the benchmark being 100%, which means you're renewing assets in line with the way they are depreciating. Council's ratio did increase significantly during the year. and that's reflective of an increased level of council spending on buildings and infrastructure renewals in the current year. However, still slightly below the industry benchmark at 96.39%. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I would like to just finalise by thanking council staff, Director Stephen Mitchell and Ron, CFO, and their team, Deanna O'Neill and Kim Spear up the back today for, I guess, the massive effort that goes into preparing the financial statements each year and allowing us, I guess, to have the council audit finalised and signed by the OLG deadline of 31 October. So, thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you I'd like to ask Mr. Dwyer 3 questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, very clear. First one, pretty obvious one, your presentation, the PowerPoint, is that able to be shared with the councillors, because it gives us a very good summary of our situation?
Certainly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In one slide there, you talked about the cross-border implications of some of the financing of different things, and we are part of a joint organisation. We have a boundary with one of our joint organisation partners. How is the audit of the joint organisation going to be done that affects all the councils involved in the joint organisation? Have you come across that yet?
I don't think that auditors have been appointed to the joint organisations yet. It is something that we have been speaking to the audit office about, but I haven't really got a clear understanding as to whether the JOs will fit under their mandate or how that will work, but that's something that we are pursuing. The cross-border issues for local councils was more around state borders and you know, New South Wales, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, I think.
And my final question, Mr. Dwyer, thank you. The cash from MACLEAY Valley Way affects our own sourcing ratio, and we're way below on the past 2 years. What do we need to do, or I presume you already have this in hand with Director Fish, not Director Fish, Director Mitchell. What do we need to do to improve that situation of our own sourcing?
Well, I think it'll improve itself when those large non-cash contributions stop coming through. So whilst it appears as, you know, a cross, if you like, in that you didn't meet the industry benchmark, I think there is obviously a very good reason for that, and that industry benchmark should be looked at over a period of time rather than just 1 year where an abnormal item has occurred. So what we were able to see is without that one-off event, council would have met that benchmark.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morris.
Whether it's a question for you, Jeff, or whether it should be a question to the General Manager, we'll find out when I ask it. But I'd like to explore further into the building and infrastructure renewal ratio, which saw a considerable jump from about 40% to just under 100%. Were there any one-off specific actions that resulted in that? And is it likely to drop back, or is it likely to stay at that level? And I suppose what I'm talking about is that there's been a considerable injection of money from the state government to undertake capital improvements to the old highway that was handed over, which would have obviously influenced that figure. Do you see it staying at that, or do you see it dropping off? And I suppose the General Manager would have somewhat more of an idea as to that, or Jeff might have some insight as well.
I'm happy to pass it on to you, to be
honest. Through Mr. Chair, whether it stays up or drops down will be a decision that, or the result of that will be the outcome of a decision made by council in terms of our long-term financing. There certainly has been a concerted effort to put more money into that infrastructure renewal, and we need to try and maintain that. As we present over the next couple of months, I think early next year, the financial sustainability plan, then that will really say whether that's going to stay up where it needs to be or it'll drop back a little bit. But we'll be presenting to council, I think, ways to keep that up at a high level.
But has any of that increase been as a result of those one-off grants in this year? Or has that been as a result of council-provided funding?
Yeah, my understanding, through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that obviously those grants would have been a contributing factor to that ratio getting closer to the benchmark. And just further to what the General Manager said, obviously as we go through the planning process for next year's long-term financial plan, that'll be a major consideration in terms of our capital investment and the impacts we'll have on that ratio. We're also doing a significant amount of work, or starting to do a significant amount of work in relation to asset management, and a lot of that, as we improve our maturity in that space, will help understand this ratio and what we need to do in terms of managing that going forward.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer, for your presentation today. Obviously, for our audience, my question is, you're obviously reporting on our financial position, whether we're handling our finances moving forward in the right direction. I saw on one of those reports that there was compare your council to other councils. That's my question. How are we heading in our average? How are we heading in our rate base and our expenditure? Are we financially heading in the right direction? I know you've only just done the last financial year, but you know there's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the slides that I have illustrated on the key performance indicators, or the key benchmarks that the Office of Local Government have set, largely you can see a positive trend across, well, nearly all of them, to be honest. So actions that have been taken, probably largely coming out of the Fit for the Future process and understanding what council's position was and where it needed to go, have driven or led to decisions being made that have. But I think, as other comments that have been made, Director Mitchell, etc., council obviously has a little way still to go there, particularly in that buildings and infrastructure renewal ratio. That's the one that sticks out, and you know, we don't actually audit Special Schedule 7, so the numbers in there around cost to bring infrastructure to a satisfactory standard and required maintenance costs are not one that we have been able to audit, or as part of the audit mandate at this point in time. But to me, that's sort of, you know, the key.
So just another question, Mr. Dwyer. So to yourself as an auditor, our council being I believe quite a small rate base but a large area, we often have more different financial issues to work with, rather than councils, say, of the Hastings that have a similar area but a much larger population. So that's my question. You know, on the average, that's our main difference, just our rate base.
Yeah, you're not that uncommon. I think you start to move west of the coast, and a lot of councils have those same challenges. So where do they get their funding from? Well, obviously, grants are important, particularly to bring assets to a satisfactory standard. You know, some of the councils that I work with have, for example, a number of timber bridges that they need to replace. Well, you know, they're reliant on bridge replacement programs that the government has available. So I think the challenges that you got are not that unique, but maybe different to coastal councils.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. O'Dwyer. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, we'll move on. Consideration of motions for supplementary reports and motions for the change of order of business. There is none. Okay, we'll move on to consideration of reports relating to public forum matters.
Move that way.
Moved by Councillor Morris,
13.3
seconded by
forward.
Councillor McGinn, that we move forward 13.2.
13.3
And 3?
is the audit report.
Yes. All in favour? Aye. That's carried. We'll deal with 13.2.
I move that we move the recommendation with the addition of section 5 within that was discussed within the presentation. So part 1A and part 5 of the saltwater area.
Director?
Through the chair, to do what Councillor Morris has suggested in what he's moving, you would need to review the planning proposal. So I don't think you can consider that recommendation today.
So what would the delay? What delay would be caused by reviewing the planning proposal?
So that would mean we'd have to defer the whole report. Is that correct?
Or can that planning proposal be reviewed by staff and actioned as soon as it's completed?
Through the chair, we'd need to, I guess, consider the full context of that area, and obviously this current report is put forward as a housekeeping adjustment in that it's some minor changes. If we were to increase the area certainly related to that the southern area of salt water to have an increased area to what's currently suggested, it may well not be a housekeeping adjustment. So you could well need to be a planning proposal in its own merit rather than being part of a housekeeping adjustment as it is presented to you today.
If a further report was brought forward, could Section 5 be undertaken as a housekeeping amendment subsequent to this gateway determination?
Through the chair, we'd need to consider that and take some further advice on that. I guess the other thing that you may be able to consider is that the recommendation presented to you today is for that part, for the section that's in the red area that's in your report, the red circle. The surrounding areas to that could be part of a subsequent planning proposal rather than being incorporated into this current one. And certainly given the urgency related to the Malbec area, in terms of that there is work in progress, and there's obviously a real probability that development applications could be sought to be submitted in the early part of next year. As it stands at the moment, those development applications cannot be submitted due to the area being part of the urban release area.
So, councillors, before we proceed, we still don't have a seconder for this. He withdrew.
I withdrew, yep. Just based on
Seconded by Councillor Horval.
A question
is correct.
Mr.
Can
Chairman.
I ask a question?
No, it's the motion.
So I would like to move an amendment.
Have a question.
Can I do that?
I got a question.
Yes.
I'd like to move an amendment, and the amendment is the original motion.
I've just got a question on it. Is it okay? Yeah, I'll second.
Yes, just hold on a second. Yes. Councillor Morris.
From the comments that were provided by Mr. Toole, that the Section 5 is in different ownership and is progressing with approvals and will very soon be at the same stage. I believe that we need to facilitate that portion of land being able to be developed in the same way. Whether from the advice from Director Fish it needs to be as was moved, or whether I should be looking at an amendment which is essentially the original motion but with an additional clause added to it, in that council pursues the action or undertakes actions to allow the release of Section 5 as soon as possible, whether that be by the way of another housekeeping amendment or whether that be by the way of the generation of the appropriate planning instruments to allow the Part 3A area to be released and developed. But I think that we need to highlight that if we're being told that it's going to delay the entire thing by adding Section 5, we need to facilitate as an amendment to the original recommendation that we want staff to facilitate the release of Section 5 or the release of the whole area, if possible, in as timely a manner as possible.
Just a comment, please, from the Director.
Through the Chair, an option may be, Councillor Morris, is that we bring a further report to the next meeting of Council on the options for you for the remaining area that's in that urban release area, and then you can consider your way with some more specific advice on that area as to how you want to move that forward, whether that be through a DCP for the area or a planning proposal for the future stages. So that may be a more appropriate means moving forward. So consider the recommendation as it is shown today to proceed to request a gateway determination, and then we could bring a report to, say, the next council meeting on the options that are available for the remaining area.
So would it be likely to come to the next council meeting?
I'd expect that would be possible, Councillor Morris, yes.
Yeah, I can get a lot on that. So I would like to change my original motion to be what is there with the addition, which I suppose now is a foreshadowed amendment or a second amendment.
Unless somebody's willing to
Yeah, unless the mover and the seconder is happy with it, that we go with the original one excluding section 5, but we have a report brought back for options to facilitate the release of the remaining areas. Well, I'm not going to stipulate it be brought back to the December meeting. I'm going to stipulate it be brought back to council, so that if it can't be done by December because of staffing issues, we're not in breach of the resolution. But I would expect it to come back as soon as reasonably possible.
I'd like to ask a question about
Yes.
it, please.
Just 1 second.
This is...
1 second. We'll just wait for everything to be put up there.
My question...
So the southern area of saltwater.
But my question
Councillor
about
Patterson.
this development is that I haven't seen a final road planning of the complete development, not sections. Different owners that I understand have obviously different parts of this development which we want to see go ahead. That it's been staged in 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, is that based on the road development? This question, I suppose, would be through you, Chair, to Director Fish, because I still haven't seen a design plan of the finished road development. I do understand that each of the developers don't necessarily want a main road on their part.
Through the Chair, I'm happy to take that public question on notice and circulate some more comprehensive information in relation to that question. Certainly the Part 3A approval from some time back related to the full area that is shown. There's been a number of modifications over time to individual stages within that full area. So I'm happy to provide some advice. I'll take that on notice and give you more detailed advice in relation to that question.
Yeah, that question is around. I am concerned that if we're changing the progression of this estate, that we may end up with a whole pile of mess. I'd like to see this progress, that the owners of all parts of this actually end up with a property that is most valuable to them and to the residents.
Can that be part of the report?
Well, with that in mind, Councillor Patterson's comments, would it be reasonable to us that the report that's been brought back for the options also examines the road connectivity issues and the staging of the development?
Councillor Shields.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So my question was partly answered by Director Fish in terms of how are we dealing with the other stages to bring those through to fruition, and you said possibly a planning proposal, possibly a DCP. How long will that take? And obviously we've singled out 1A for this housekeeping amendment, and I understand that there are lots sold and they want to move forward, but also obviously stage 5 is moving forward as well, and are we prejudicing them by making them wait? And how long will this possibly take, the planning proposal, the DCP, whatever it, depending on what route we take?
Through the Chair, there's two options in relation to resolving the matter of the urban release area. One is to complete a DCP for the site, and the second is a planning proposal to have the urban release area removed from the land, the area of land. It obviously depends on resourcing, but to develop up a DCP or the planning proposal could take of the order of a few months, but then you've got obviously processes that follow from that in terms of the approval pathway. So in the instance of a planning proposal, it would be via a gateway determination, which then goes out for community consultation and then ultimately comes back to either the Minister or Council to make decision on. So the processes are quite long in relation to that, and similarly a DCP as well would also go through an exhibition period and ultimately come back to Council. So you're talking of the order of anywhere between 6 and 12 months for either of those processes to occur.
Okay. Including the one that we've got on the books today.
The one that's the recommendation here at the moment would be to go to obviously a gateway determination. We'd assume that would come in the new year. It would then need to go on out for community consultation, and at the completion of that period, come back to Council for a decision. So you're certainly looking around the at least the probably April to May time period for that to occur.
Okay, and so it could be included as a housekeeping amendment, the same as this 1A stage 5 could also be included, say, after we get our report back at the next meeting.
You could do a new planning proposal, whether that be a housekeeping or a planning proposal for that full urban release area. We could obviously advise that in the report to come back to you as to what the most appropriate way forward is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to remove the
Okay.
amendment
So the
that
amendment
you've got the
has been withdrawn.
Mr. Chair, my another question, if it's okay, through to
Yes.
Director Fish. Is there a possibility, and I suppose we'd have to speak with the actual owner of the
Sorry,
circle
Councillor, can
park.
you pull your microphone down a little bit, please? Thanks.
The part that's in question at the moment is with the circle on it. Okay, in our plan. Is there a possibility that that part could be removed and not included in this housekeeping? And would that then suffice?
Through the Chair, the planning proposal would need to be amended if that were to occur, and I would think brought back to Council for reconsideration with just the other two matters included. So what was the second part of your question, sorry? Councillor Patterson?
That was it, whether that would solve the problem on a short-term basis, allowing the development of the current plan.
Yeah, through your Chair, the concern would be obviously with the Malback area is that the subdivision work is currently in progress there. It is quite well progressed. Yeah, there could be lots sought to have development applications submitted in the early part of next year, which as it stands at the moment, we can't consider those development applications due to the area being in the urban release area.
Okay. Councillor Morris, would you like the right of reply?
I did mention a comment to include in the report that was up on in the fourth option for the options report, on the basis of some comments made by Councillor Patterson. So could I ask that we add another dot point? Because I don't want a review of the staging of this to delay coming back on the options to release it from the urban release strategy. So I think that if we are going to review the staging and the road connectivity, that needs to be as a separate report and not potentially delay the facilitating the release of the remainder. If the seconder would agree to that, because I think we should be looking at that, but we should be looking at that as a separate matter and not unnecessarily delay the first part. But all I'd like to say is that there is land there that is being developed. We need to facilitate DAs being able to be approved for it. It's much better to have land that's being developed with houses on it and people living on it and activity, rather than just bare dirt which blows dust everywhere.
That was his right of reply. So there's no more questions, sorry. Okay, well, I'm going to suspend standing orders because this could go on forever, because we've just changed it again, and thank the St Joseph's Primary School for coming today. You're very well behaved, so thank you very much, and I hope that you did take something out of it. And not that we're all boring. So thank you. It's technically not a new motion. Still got 10 minutes.
May I ask a
Just wait a
question?
sec.
Mr. Chair.
We'll resume standing orders. Councillor Horwell. I know. Councillor McGinn.
I'd just like to ask a question because I sort of understood what Bruce was saying, but we've changed the words up there as you closed the debate. I'm not sure that the words up there are exactly what you said either. And I suspect really that the report to be brought back that's providing options to facilitate the lease really does need to be considering the staging and connectivity, because without that you're not considering the stages of release. So I think 4 and 5 are sort of the 1 point, are they not? Or would be better as the 1 point, because that report does need to consider the road connectivity and staging.
You could actually combine 4 and 5, and it could be a report be brought back to provide options to facilitate the release of the remainder of the southern area of saltwater, including the staging and road connectivity.
The only thing is, I don't want the review of the staging and the road connectivity necessarily delaying getting the report back so that we can say go ahead.
Yep.
Well,
we'll take that intent, and we can actually look at that. Yep.
Yeah, I'm reading that as part of the intent at high level.
Yeah. So you end up with just the one, and at the end of urban release area, including the staging and road connectivity.
Now, when you look at the map, 5 would fit in very easily because it's got the main road going in near it, and 6 would be done after 5, so there's going to be connectivity there.
Okay, so you're happy with that, councillor?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay, so we're going to put the motion if there's no more debate. Right of reply? All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We might actually adjourn for morning tea. Okay, councillors. Councillors. Councillors, thank you. We'll move on to 13.3, the annual report. Moved Councillor McGinn, seconded Councillor Patterson. Would you like to speak?
Mr. Chair, I think we've had an enormous year of change, of which we've had some of our new team available for it. It's great that we've actually got an annual report that's come to fruition. I think there's some really good results there. We've had our auditor take us through the highlights of the report, and I commend the report to be adopted.
Is there any debate?
Found it, Mr. Chair. Annual report. Thank you.
There's no debate, Mr. Chair, but I've noticed that there's a couple of minor typos within the annual report, which I'll bring up separately with the staff later on.
Thank you. No questions, Councillor Horville?
Mr. Chair, there's been no submissions on this, or none at all?
The auditor.
No. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
So I put the motion. All in favour? Aye. That's carried. Now we'll move to number 11, consideration of reports relating to a consensus motion. We have item 13.6, 13.7, 13.8, 13.9, 13.10 and 21. Councillor Horville?
I've turned myself off. On. Thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to withdraw 13.6, 13.10 and 20.1. 20.1 I have some questions, and it's in confidence, so needs to be asked there.
So you're looking to change the motion to 13.6 and 13.10?
Yes.
Okay. That's right. So we've got 7, 8 and 9. All in favour?
Aye.
That's carried. All in favour again? We'll do the vote again. All in favour? That's carried.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I've withdrawn 3 of them, or 2 of them that are in the general public area. Is it normal practice that I would move the motion?
Not necessarily, I don't think.
Because I do have an amendment to the actual motion, and I just thinking of good practice saving time, and my amendments would be straightforward, that it would be supported. So,
well, you would move the, if you're the first person, you'd move the amendment that the item that you've pulled out.
Okay,
is my understanding.
Yeah, I won't be rushing to do it, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll move to 13.1. Moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Shields. Councillor Morris, would you like to speak?
It's straightforward. I don't believe we need to discuss it in any detail. It's a logical, sensible.
Any debate? Councillor Horville?
Yes, I'd like to speak against it.
Sure.
Just making sure I'm on the right page. It's 13.1. Is that correct? Yep. Thank you. I'm not supporting it because, again, I have to mention that the Kempsey Local Environment Plan for this area says 800 square metres, and the 2 blocks of land, if this subdivision goes ahead, will be 600 and 673. And I've said this before, and I will say it at every time. Why do we have a Kempsey Local Environment Plan if we allow such widespread variations like this one, which is cutting or 25% smaller than the allowed area? So I'm saying that if we want this to be allowed, we should vary the Kempsey Local Environment Plan first for the whole area, and then allow these sorts of subdivisions. In effect, the reason for the subdivision is not there in the documents, but by being able to subdivide the person owning the 2 blocks would be able to get more money, and that's all very well and good, but that's the reason for the variation, not that it's going to benefit the Kempsey Local Environment Plan. I know this is a technical point that I hope some of you will try to understand. We have a local environment plan that says 800 square metres, and nearly every time one of these comes up, we vote it through. When are we going to fix the Kempsey Local Environment Plan so these things can go through without having to come with this variation? It's a very simple idea, I guess, and if you're speeding down the road and you're picked up by the policeman for doing 100 in a 80 zone, you're going to get booked. You can't say, look, I just want a variation here. We'll just make a variation and let me go 25% over the speed limit, and the policeman says, yeah, okay, I'll give you a variation. This is what we're doing. We're saying the rules are there, but we're going to let you vary them at any time. You don't like my example? I'm just saying we have a rule, we should stick to it.
Can I just make a comment, Mr. Chair? The planning legislation isn't black and white. It is actually there to be interpreted, and it allows for interpretation. There certainly is no widespread changing of the LEP. There's been nearly 160 DAs approved by council, and there's been only a very small number that actually are outside the LEP. It's not a widespread practice.
Councillor Patterson.
Hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually just making comments and speaking for this notice of motion for the subdivision at South West Rocks. It's plainly the block of land will be utilised for its best value to the owner, but also deliver the best value for South West Rocks. Us as councillors need to make sure that we provide ample future housing, and I will say that there will be blocks moving towards in the future that will be smaller than this because of the way that housing requirements are, especially in South West Rocks with people getting older and older, and house lot sizes needing to be smaller. But this is a great development.
Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm supporting the motion as well. In response to Councillor Horville's points, on page 9 there, it says clearly, and this is a recommendation by our planner. So he's saying that development consent can only be granted if council is satisfied of the following. The underlying purpose of the development is to promote the efficient use of residential land to ensure the lot sizes have practical and efficient layout. The area of the proposed lots is consistent with the area of surrounding residential lots. In the vicinity there are lots 400, 600 square. So I agree with the point the General Manager makes. The guidelines are there, the rules are there as a guideline, but if the planner thinks it fits in with the surrounding area, if it's efficient use of the land, if it's another family in the valley, it's a good thing. Thank you.
Councillor Morris to close.
Mr. Chair, if I speak, I close, but there are no other people against it, so I can't see why we should continue on to debate it ad nauseum.
Mr. Chair, may I speak, but you'll have to rule on this. I would like to speak against it. I've one more point.
You have spoken already, but
I have.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Morris. I would just like to point out that the planning guidelines are there as guidelines, and those guidelines have to be followed by the planning staff with a small latitude for variation. When that variation is beyond that latitude, it needs to come to council. It's not the planning staff's decision that it's the right thing to do. The planning staff make a recommendation to council, and if we believe that that is efficient and effective use of the land, we should be approving it. And in this case, besides being efficient and effective use of the land, council's also being dedicated part of Lot 1, which will improve the functionality of the road reserve for future development. It's a no-brainer that this should be approved by council, and we should recognise that the planning instrument is there. In a lot of areas in South West Rocks, it's 500 square metres. Just because it's 800 here doesn't mean that we have to be dogmatic and insisting on 800. We need to look at the merit of the individual proposal.
So debate's closed. I put the motion. All in favour? All against? That's carried. We'll move on to 13.4, the organisational transformation update. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded Councillor McGinn. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak?
Not too much to say other than I do think that believe that the organisation is working fantastically. I really think that we have some great people amongst our repertoire in council, and the report actually supports the good work that this new organisation is doing.
Councillor Horville?
May I ask a question, Mr.
Sure thing.
I presume it's to Director Mitchell about money. Has the transformational cost to council been within the planned budget, or has it gone more than what was expected? And will we be given those numbers at some point?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of being given the numbers, the report actually quantifies what has been spent in terms of transformational cost to date. In terms of what was in the original budget, I would have to actually check. I'm not sure if anyone's aware of. Was there original budget? No. Yeah. So I know there was obviously the resolution of council to appoint LKS Quero to undertake the consultancy work, but there would have been no budget that I was aware of that would deal with redundancy costs and those sorts of items.
And just further to that, Mr. Chair, that on page 21 it actually outlines the costs to it. The large part of those were actually in redundancy costs, and we'll actually see those savings realised. I think it's a bit over 2 years that those costs from the reduction in the senior management team.
And ongoing savings, yeah. So before I put the motion, I just wanted to congratulate Craig also on driving this, but also the leadership team and everybody else that has been involved with council, but also us as councillors, because we made that decision to do this. But yeah, congratulations to everybody involved.
Can I
just before you do, can I just respond to the Chair? Yeah, can I just say, look, we had a all-staff barbecue last Wednesday where we highlighted, and there was several pages, and councillors asked for it yesterday, I'll circulate that out today, of the improvements the staff have initiated through the year. And this is, I guess, for the community to know as well. We have a fantastic staff team here, and certainly for the three of us in the senior executive team, we couldn't do it without our managers and everyone on the ground right through. I was talking to one of the staff on Saturday or Sunday morning down in Clive Street, and he was saying how we had an event on up here at the skate park on the weekend, and overnight someone had smashed nearly 24 glass bottles on there, and he was there at 4 o'clock in the morning cleaning it up. They're the things you don't see from the staff. They are the ones that actually really deserve this credit, because they are an amazing group of staff.
Councillor Morris?
I'd just like to ask or make a query in regard to point 2, because I'm confident that the right things are happening, but I'm just wondering whether it is the right time frame before we get another update on how things are progressing. And if we get one in the July council meeting, is that a reasonable time frame for it to include all the information to the completion of the 18-19 financial year? Because quite obviously the report is going to have to be prepared and distributed to councillors probably within 1 or 2 weeks at the end of the financial year. Is our information system going to be good enough by that time to be able to facilitate that happening?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we'll be targeting it. As you can see, we're already collecting a lot of the new initiatives as we go, and we want to proceed with all those things. So we've set in place a process using our executive officers of actually gathering that information. So we'll be able to build this report through, month by month, fairly well. So we're confident we'll get as much as possible in that time frame. We don't want to push it out by another month or so. We'd like to capture it pretty quickly for the councillors in the community.
And I suppose another way, rather than a formal report coming back to council like this, would it be possible, say, every 3 or 6 months that councillors just get an informal update on how things are going and what's progressing, and what actions have been done, because that way we're kept informed of the entire process and what's occurring.
Yeah, we can certainly include it in our briefings and do that on a quarterly basis, give a bit of an update on what's actually happening, what's on the agenda.
Just just one more comment before we put the motion, is that I do believe in the workplace, especially in a big organisation like council, looking beyond the finance and looking towards building a team that's included from the management right through to the ground staff, looking to a team that enjoys going to work, that contributes to their job. To me, that's what council is heading towards, and to me, council is working towards achieving that and having a place where we will notice that unplanned sick days will be reduced. We will notice that having happiness in going to work every day will be increased, and being part of a team that moves forward. So for that, I think, you know, the staff, the hierarchy right through to the ground staff are heading in the right direction, and I applaud you guys.
Yep. Right a reply. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hall.
Can we ask questions about the documents, please? That are. Oh,
Sure.
Sorry, no, I'm out of order. I'm talking about the next item.
Okay. Councillor Saul, would you like? No, that's okay. So we put the motion. All in favour? That's carried. We'll move on to 13.5 September 2018 Quarterly Budget Review. Sure. Moved by Councillor Morris.
Well, just note for the councillors that weren't able to make it last night. During the course of putting the business paper together, we had an actual issue with our computer system. There were several items that we identified that we needed to correct, but the computer system actually crashed and we weren't actually able to do it. It would have meant holding up the release of the business paper, which we didn't want to do because we didn't know how long it would take to actually rectify the system. So we issued the business paper, but there are, as you'll see in point 1.3, corrections that need to be made in terms of... Yep.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor McGinn? Councillor Horwell?
Matters in progress, Mr Chair. Can we ask some questions about it,
sure.
please? Go to page 3, please. It's about the land and Baker Drive at Crescent Head, top of the page. It's a process has been completed. Land is now classified as operational. Recommend removal. And it was talking about any submissions. So were there any submissions received for that item?
Through the Chair, the comment in terms of processes being completed would refer to obviously part 1 and 2 of that resolution, so I would expect there was no submissions.
Thank you. On page 6, talking about the planning proposal, Gateway 1 on 600 Macleay Valley Way, at the bottom of page 6, and I've got this answered already, but I think I should put it in public. Is this planning proposal now redundant, as there seems to be a building action on the adjacent block that already has approval?
Through the Chair, as you would see through some current works which have recently commenced, there's a site immediately to the north of 600 Macleay Valley Way where there is a approved service centre development. Work has recently commenced on that site, and in terms of the 600 Macleay Valley Way site, it's currently subject to the planning proposal to amend the zoning. As discussed when we actually considered this item, it's important that I guess the market determines how the development occurs. Our consideration, or Council's consideration, is really on the basis of the planning merit for an individual site, which obviously council's determined to pursue a gateway determination for the rezoning, and that's the current status. The gateway was issued, and it is the planning proposal is currently on exhibition.
Another one probably to you, Director Fish. On page 12, the repainting and refurbishing of Kempsey Traffic Bridge. In the progress, you've got discussions right at the bottom occurring with RMS regarding the possibility of contribution to replacement of this, given the current hand railing is insufficient. The hand railing on the bridge, I would assume, belongs to the RMS because they own the bridge. But the bit of the path coming off the bridge would probably be Kempsey's. How's the progress going on that negotiation, and how soon will it get to a conclusion, please?
Through the Chair, the responsibility for the bridge has essentially been in the past that the travel lanes are RMS and the actual structure, and council has responsibility for the footway. There's a few different parts, I guess, to the pedestrian fence. There's the fence that's on the approaches, which is certainly council's responsibility. The pool fence, pool style fence that's on the approaches continues on the certainly on the western side up to where it meets the truss. That's essentially certainly the section that we're referring to in terms of that comment, in that we're certainly seeking a contribution from RMS in relation to that handrail, but realistically they don't necessarily have an obligation in that regard. So we're hopeful that we can get to a resolution where we can get a positive outcome, certainly for any work that's needed, but there's still some discussion to occur in that regard.
Okay, any timeline on getting a resolution, Director Fish?
Through the Chair, I'd hope certainly by the end of the year to be able to provide an answer on that to Councillor Hall.
Thank you. On page 21, just a technical point, talking about funding for the libraries. It says both New South Wales Government and Labor have announced funding commitments of $60 million. I think the Labor Party has thrown in an extra 500,000 trying to win a vote. So just that number is slightly different. I don't think we'll get much more, but I'm just thinking that could be corrected. Thank you. And on page 27, and it's on community petitions. The resolution calls for a policy to be developed. Is it separate from completion? Oh no, Code of Meeting Practice, I should say. I put the abbreviation in. My mistake, and I apologise. So, is the petitions calling for a policy to be developed on it, the resolution calls for a policy to be developed, would it not be separate from the Code of Meeting Practice if it's a policy?
Yeah, through Mr Chair, I had a discussion with Councillor Morris on this during the week as well. There's actually will be two items, and looking at this, I should have actually picked this up when it came through. It does need to be incorporated into the Code of Meeting Practice in terms of how petitions are handled in the meetings, but we do need to develop a procedure which will actually help educate the community on the form and nature of a petition, and the process for them to submit it to council, which will be separate to the Code of Meeting Practice. So we may want to actually just change that wording to reflect that both a procedure and the Code of Meeting Practice will be developed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Baxter?
Just on page 15, if I could ask Director Fish about the water treatment plant at Crescent Head. There's a point there that something had to be sent away to Infrastructure Sydney. Is everything clear to go ahead with that now?
Through the Chair, we're very close to having all that, satisfying all those requirements for Infrastructure New South Wales. So I'd expect certainly within the coming month that should be all resolved, which will allow us to obviously tender the works in the new year.
Thank you. And secondly, Director Fish, page 26, point 2 there, as far as the headland of Crescent Head, where the water reservoir is, requests for the member of Oxley for funding for the embellishment of the area. Have we got a reply to that?
I've spoken to our local member about it. I haven't actually got anything back yet, but we'll follow that one up.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Morris?
Just a couple. On item 315, we've got down that the public exhibition closes on the 4th of December. But
What
we're
page,
recommending
please?
Page 13.
Thank you.
Which is item 315. We've got down on the 8th of November, the public exhibition period closes the 4th of December 2018, but we've got it recommended for removal. I would like it not to be removed until we've resolved the matter completely, because it will be adopted if there are no submissions. We don't know whether there will be no submissions at this stage, so we don't know whether there will be a further report back to Council. So I'd like to move an amendment that item 315 is not removed. Item 20, sorry, that one's been answered. Equally with item 329 on page 24, bottom of 24 on the top of 25, it's recommended for removal of items 1 to 4, which is in fact the whole lot, but we're still in the negotiations, so I'd like to move an amendment that the item 329 remain until the negotiations are finalised. I'd also like to note that, that it's good to see that we negotiated a saving of $24,000 on the purchase of the furniture for the caravan parks after asking the General Manager to negotiate on the additional items. The one on community petitions has been raised, and obviously it's inappropriate that we have it in the Code of Meeting Practice, the procedure and the process, and the General Manager's indicated. So does that need to be formally changed as an amendment, or that will be changed? So we need to put that as an amendment to the motion to vary that comment to include a procedure being developed and brought back to Council separately. It is also possible that some community members may actually deliver a petition directly to Council, and I note from some other councils' agendas that they have a section that's called petitions, so if any petitions are received, they're noted formally in the agenda in that way. The other one on the reporting of the grants, I acknowledge that yes, that should be removed, but I asked that there be some, I suppose, changes to the reporting format. The reporting format is there and it basically gives the name of the grant process. I would like to see it extended to give a very short scope of what the work is that is proposed. There are some of them there that I can guess what we've put the grant money in for, but the general community probably wouldn't be able to. I'd also like to have an indication as to when the works that are a subject of this grant or the grant applications are likely to commence on the ground, because there's a whole list of grant monies there. How many of them has the work commenced or the work been completed, or when is the work scheduled? So I think we probably need to have a little bit more meat in the report than what's there at the moment. So I suppose if I put an amendment that we adjust and have some more substance in the grants, reporting of council grants.
Yeah, we're happy to take it. This is the first time I think we've presented this to the council, so we certainly want to see the work in progress. The other thing that was highlighted at the briefing last night was we need to actually provide information on the grants that we've received, information back where we're unsuccessful as well.
Yeah.
So the community is aware of what's been applied for.
Fully agree with that as well, because it's important that the community can read it and understand what the grant was for, rather than just say it's a grant for improving water supplies. in the Kempsey area. Now, and I'm guessing that that is the new water treatment plant at Kempsey, but you have to have some knowledge and background to what's been discussed in the council chamber to know that. They're the only ones that I've got. But I would like to go back and quickly discuss the three matters that come up last night, because I wasn't at the meeting. The proposed 500,000 increase in sewer fund, that's self-explanatory. When I went and checked the document, I found that the figures that were in the document was 468, not 520. So is that in fact correct? The Plumbers Lane West End variation to be adjusted from 520 to 468. Well, I found in the documents that it actually said 468. So it would seem, or maybe I was finding it in the wrong place. And I also couldn't find anywhere in the document where it mentioned the Tozer Street variation. It says to be amended to 300, but I couldn't find anywhere it mentioned what the variation was.
It's at the bottom of page. Through you, Mr. Chair. Tozer Street's at the bottom of page 13.
On
the quarterly budget review statement. So the actual attachment.
Which attachment we're talking about?
13.05.1.
13.5.1. Okay, I went and looked in the written summaries and it had the 468, not the 520 in the written summary. And I couldn't find it in the written summary about the 300 in Tozer Street. I take to the fact that it is probably in the financials, in the financial summaries. Yeah, just that it's counterintuitive when we say we're adjusting it, but when you look at the written summary, it actually says 468 in the written summary and 520 in the financial reports.
Okay, can we get all that captured information up there? It's already up there? Okay. Are you happy with that as a seconder? Yep. Councillor Horville?
On grants too, I'm talking about Stuart McIntyre Dam, the grant on the last page of grant summary, it says that we've got a balanced tank chlorination facility and fluoridation facility, and the total project cost is 4.72 million. We submitted it on the 25th of January, and we still haven't waiting an outcome, and we've the level application, the expression of interest approved, detailed business case soon to be submitted. As a separate matter, the Director of Water, Wes Manager, he's told us when we were being briefed that the necessity of upgrading the treatment plant with $35 million to actually be able to use the water at all times. At the moment, the dam water can't be used because of its acidity level. And even though we nearly went to water restrictions, we had a full dam and the water can't be used. And there was a talk about it at a previous meeting that we were going to investigate whether, when the original funding came through to put the dam in and the pumping station, whether the state government had fully finished their commitment to put in a full water treatment plant. Now, have there been any sourcing of those original documents, or do we need a separate grant application sometime in the future to try and get that money?
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Horville. Yes, we are doing looking into that long history that you refer to, the previous discussion. The initial look that we've done, it looks as if, I guess, the works that have occurred were basically on the basis of a decision of council, not the state government, but we will certainly get a confirmation for you of that and circulate that to councillors. Through the chair, that wouldn't, the status of that matter doesn't impact what you see in front of you in terms of the grant applications pending.
Okay. Councillor Morris, would you like to close the debate? Reserve the right? Okay, we'll put the motion. All in favour? All against? That's carried. We will move, hold on 1 second, I haven't even called it yet. 13.6, fluoridation of water supply. It's moved by Councillor McGinn, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Would you like to speak to your...
No, I reserve the right.
Councillor Horville?
Yes, I was going to have an amendment, and very good of Councillor McGinn to jump in, even though she knew I had withdrawn it. I would put in a further point 3.
Order. That's unnecessary.
Are you going to make a ruling, Mr. Chair, on that?
I'll accept that.
It's out of order?
Yes, thank you. I'd like you to withdraw your statement if possible, please. Thank you.
I'll withdraw with the microphone on too.
Your
Thank you.
amendment, please.
Yes, my amendment, add a point 3. A further report on all possible implications and non-consent be obtained from...
Slow down, Councillor Horville.
obtained from the legal people at Local Government New South Wales and furnished to the December Council meeting for determination.
That's your amendment.
Could I speak? Yes.
Do we have a seconder?
No seconder?
No. Councillor Morris will second that. You can speak to your motion. Or
Thank
your amendment, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are not legal people, and the document that was received from the people who put it together used legal words I don't understand, and we referred back to Local Government New South Wales information that came before these letters came in. And to me, they are new legal issues, and through due diligence, I'd like to have the implications spelled out clearly legally for us. At the moment, I don't know, and I wouldn't want to proceed with the fluoridation aspect if we are legally challenged by going against a non-consent of a community member, and we've got 34 of them have written in, or 33. It's an issue where a delay of a month shouldn't be an issue, and I'm sure Local Government New South Wales have the expert legal team that could provide us with a written legal advice on the actual non-consent section. I'd also like to find out from, through you, Mr. Chair, the General Manager's viewpoint on what would the delay of a month affect us if we got that legal opinion on the non-consent aspect. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, look, if Council is of the mind to delay it for a month, that's not going to make any issue to the timing of anything. We're not likely to be installing fluoride at Crescent Head in the next month, so nothing's going to change in that regard. However, the advice that we'll get back from Local Government New South Wales will be in line with the advice it already has provided to us. They've made it very, very clear that individual councillors and the council as a whole is acting in good faith, and that legally they cannot be challenged on that.
So can I finish up? Thank you for that advice. The non-consent is a separate matter, I think. I don't understand it. I do understand the previous advice, Mr. General Manager, but I don't understand this part of it, and I'm quite concerned that we're not showing due diligence and getting the full legal advice on the non-consent section.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the issue of the non-consent has been particularly in relation to what the opponents of fluoride have actually said in relation to the Therapeutic Goods Act, and as has been made very clear, the Therapeutic Goods Act is not applicable in this case.
Any debate?
Can I close debate?
No, you are speaking for or against an amendment.
I'm speaking against the amendment.
Sure
then.
thing.
Okay, I'll speak against the amendment. I'm speaking against the amendment, which is to seek further advice, and the basis of that is that we've already received advice. Do we need advice on advice? We are able, and I do consider it good due diligence, that we have sought the advice and that we're able to rely on the advice of experts I agree. None of us are experts in this area, so we rely on the advice of experts, and that is the due diligence that we have undertaken. I also take comfort in the fact that we're not the only council that has been requested by the New South Wales Government to add fluoridation to our water supply. So we're certainly not out on our own or in a unique circumstance. So I really see it quite unnecessary to bring back yet again another further report.
Any more debate? No, I'll put the amendment. All in favour of the amendment? All against? The amendment's lost. We were back to the original motion.
I'll speak against the motion.
Yes.
There are quite a few people who live in different parts of the world. In Australia and the United States, there's possibly about 375 million people. Most of those people have access to fluoridated water. Majority of Europe, 97%, don't have fluoridated water. I'm giving you these facts in that there are places and countries that are turning fluoridation off. And there must be scientific reasons.
We're not talking about whether we have fluoridation or not. We're talking about non-consent and the legal advice and obligations of us.
Yes, I am speaking to that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
The issue then is the due diligence. If we have information about the Earth not being round and the majority of people say it's flat, this happened a few years ago, by the way, well, then we should show due diligence and say, well, there must be some reason, let's ask some questions. And at the moment, we have relied on a local government New South Wales legal advice from April 2018, and we've only received the non-consent letters in October 2018, bringing up a different aspect of this situation. So to me, the due diligence is we should be considering carefully all aspects and not thinking, well, the well's still flat and fluoridation's wonderful. We should be stepping back and asking questions. And not being expert legal people, I'm still thinking we need that extra legal advice. You voted that down. I would hope that you would consider that we don't proceed with this at the moment.
Councillor McGinn, would you like to close the vote?
Thank you. Well, I don't really know how, whichever side you're on the fluoridation debate anyway, how you could vote against this motion, because it's to acknowledge receipt and it's to note legal advice. So I don't, to me, the motion's quite clear, and I think we should be voting for the motion.
I put the motion. All in favour? All against? That's carried. We'll now move to 1310, development approvals and construction certificates. Moved, Councillor Shields.
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Saul. Would you like to speak? Councillor Horville.
Yes, on page 42, I have a question, Mr. Chair. In objections, it says the proposal was not required to be public notified, however was discussed in person with the adjoining landowner holder. We had a new policy that was brought into place, and I would like the direction from Director Fish on this. The planning staff were looking and using as a reference the earlier policy, and they are now referring to the new policy. Does the new policy specify at what level of a development before written notification to neighbours occurs?
Through the Chair, the policy related to notification refers to the level of impact and refers to in terms of the significance of that impact, and where the impact is significant, then it outlines that notification should occur, which obviously our planning staff make a determination based on the level of that significance as to whether it does require notification or not. In this instance, they've elected to discuss with the adjoining landholder. I believe there was effectively structures in place there prior, so the most appropriate means of taking this one forward was viewed of having a discussion with the landowner, the adjoining landowner, rather than doing a notification, as that was viewed to be I guess a better alternative than simply advising them in writing.
Thank you, Director Fish. And on page 43, again it says on the second development application about a carport, the proposal was not required to be publicly notified. Is that within the same policy from December 2017?
Yes, that's correct. In this instance, you have a similar structure, a carport structure there at the moment, and the proposal certainly enhances that.
If I can just make a comment there, the actual policy reads that on point 5, all affected residents significantly impacted. So it's an assessment will be notified in writing. So it's only when they are significantly impacted.
So I keep referring to this, Mr. Chair, and to Director Fish on it, in that there was a huge garage built at the bottom of my house on a neighbouring block. One neighbour was notified, and myself and the other neighbour weren't notified. So I'm just wondering, is the procedure working correctly in that only some neighbours are being notified, or has that been changed?
Through Mr. Chair, I believe it's actually working properly. If it wasn't working very well, we'd have constant complaints through councillors that it actually wasn't occurring, and we're not getting that.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
Councillor Morris.
There's not so much a question, it's a question, but more about the format of the report highlighted in point 2, because there was a draft version sent out to us by email, which is quite good, except for the fact I didn't like the latter pages, because when you bring it up on your iPad to read it, you've got to freeze your iPad from turning. So when you turn it, would it be possible to format it in such a way that it appears on the screen so it's easier to read? Yeah, we'll try. Because in the iPad it comes out, the first page is perfectly right. Yeah, the next page, it's, just a formatting issue to make it easier to receive and read. Yep. Very good.
Okay, councillors, I put the motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Horval.
I would like to move an amendment. Just like to formalise what was said last night at the briefing, Mr. General Manager, that there would be an investigation at point 3 into the privacy situation of why owners are not notified in this system, and I'd like to formalise that and hopefully get a report on why we cannot be told the owners of developments, which did occur previously.
So we now have an amendment. Do we have a seconder? That lapses due to no seconder. The original motion is now back to where we were. Councillor Morris?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. We'll put the motion. All in favour? All against? That's carried. We'll now move to 15.1, Facilitator for MACLEAY Valley Wellbeing Centre. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm looking for your support with this motion in the light of recent events. it's not often I admit to being wrong, but I'm starting to feel. 2 years ago, I thought employment would be the solution for crime and drug abuse and problems in our valley. Unemployment's dropped from 11% to 6%, but for some bizarre reason, problems persist. So whether mental health problems cause crime and drug abuse, or drug abuse causes mental health, I'm not sure. I've been talking to some specialists in the valley, some doctors and psychologists, and their view is that, you know, we've got a lot of resources. I think there's over 7 organisations you could ring up today if you felt you had a mental health problem, and that would be good. But the specialists I'm talking to say that all of these organisations lack some sort of coordination, that we're still not getting runs on the board. It's a bit like a football team without a coach. So the motion today is that we, the council, try and coordinate all of these resources, bring all these stakeholders together and come up with a plan of action that would be more efficient, and we could address some of these serious problems. I mean, this persistent crime, this carjacking at the bridge and this home invasions, etc., it's just unacceptable. Now, these people have obviously got mental health issues. Now, the graphs that are in my presentation there, you can see the spikes. A lot of the problems seem to be spiking. High psychological distress is spiking. Can you move on to the next one? You're getting suicide. We're the 4th highest suicide. Look at that spike in methamphetamine. The 4th highest in New South Wales. You know, I think we really need a coordinated effort. That spike there in interpersonal violence, we're the pale blue line there. So I suppose I'm saying, psychologist Dr. Anderson says that self-harm is we're double the state average for self-harm, and that's a screaming out for help. And interesting research shows in Victoria, they're talking about dual diagnosis. A person with mental illness may receive treatment, but their use of drugs, etc., and drink is passed off as just a side effect. Well, the argument is, what comes first, the mental health and the drug abuse, or the drug abuse then the mental health? What I'm saying is I'd like the council, all of us, to throw our weight into it and try and pull all the resources together, maybe even put a request to the state and federal government to send more resources to our valley, considering all of these statistics. So yeah, that's my proposal, that the council act as a facilitator. I noticed with the Breaking the Cycle committee that was formed in 2015, mental health is a subset in that Breaking the Cycle committee. I've been reading in their minutes.
Since 2015, that's where they all trained up with.
Yeah, hello, that's right. Thank you. I've read that they have some success with employment in South Kempsey, which is good. But as far as mental health, you're quite right, Councillor Shields, that we seem to be losing the battle. And of course then we've got the crime and the drug problems and the suicide problems. It's totally unacceptable, I think, in a rich country like this. And what astounds me is we're supposed to be clever. We're supposed to be a clever country, and yet these problems persist. So I think I'd just like us all to spend some energy or throw our weight into it and pull all the resources together and try and find a solution to this, because you probably know about that.
Councillor, you've just got a minute to go.
You know, the young girl committing suicide at Kempsey High School recently, etc. the statistics are all there. It's quite depressing. So I'm just asking for your support for us to come into the battle and become a facilitator, draw all the resources together, and get a bit more efficient and try and turn those graphs around. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Whilst I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Baxter's intent, I'm afraid that I can't agree with his recommendation, and that is that Council acts as a facilitator. He mentioned the Breaking the Cycle Committee, which Council does have a participant on, and that committee has 5 measures, and it says that the measures have been chosen to track continuous improvement over a sustained period and will be tracked annually. Since the establishment of that committee, I've heard nothing back about any of these measures or the processes or procedures that have been put in place or the improvements. One of those 3, as Councillor Baxter alluded to, is drug and alcohol and mental health. So one of their prime measures is exactly what he is asking to be addressed. I think that the last thing we should be looking at doing is forming another group to facilitate something and dividing even further the resources that we have got. We need to be asking the Breaking the Cycle Committee to take this on board, report back to us what initiatives they are taking, what measures and metrics there have been, and what improvements in the longer term that they are hoping to realise, and how they're going to be doing that. And maybe they should be taking on a lot of the comments that Councillor Baxter has put in his report. We shouldn't be dividing the limited resources any more than what we need to. We should be focusing and getting that group to work, which includes all the appropriate state government departments, including health, premiers and cabinets, that there's a whole list of those, and it quite clearly states that Council is a member of that, but it's Council, Commonwealth Government, non-government agencies, Aboriginal community, and all of the state agencies, from Family and Community Services, New South Wales Police Force, Office of Communities, Department of Education, TAFE, Aboriginal Affairs, New South Wales Health, Mental Health and Drug and Alcohol, Sport and Recreation, Juvenile Services and Juvenile Justice. If we can't get that group to come up with an appropriate plan, I don't know how we are going to do better than that group could possibly do. So we need to be challenging them with coming up with an appropriate process, not dividing the limited resources that we've currently got in the Valley.
Is that possible?
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you.
You're a member of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I seconded this motion. I totally agree with Councillor Baxter. Council, as an elected body, as we are sitting here, we need to make sure that we represent our community not only in developments like we just had debate on, not only in rate structure, infrastructure, balancing the budget, not only all those things, but we need to help facilitate our community in their social issues. I do believe the intent of this notice of motion is proper, but I do believe that we are dealing with an issue that is federal, state, local government, families. So unfortunately, I do see us at the end thinking that, I was speaking before with Councillor Baxter, that we have so many agencies in this town to help individual issues and individual problems, and money, and I've asked this many years ago to our Mayor, is there any way that the money that comes into our town could come through Council, not as Council to be the ones to say, no, we're spending money here and there, but Council to be an auditor of what it delivers and what it promises. And that's something that's not happening. What's happening to me here is, in our community, is that all this scattergun approach, we have these, let's just say, Aboriginal Building Company or a drug rehabilitation centre, all these places set up that do end up falling over because of lack of direction and lack of understanding of the issues. council needs to be a facilitator, but I don't think we need to be a facilitator as in we need to set up a whole separate committee. We need to be a facilitator is, like Councillor Morris just said, to make sure that our committees report back to us, that we then do something with that information. We then get onto our state member, get onto our federal member, say, look, we've got a crime issue in our town, which we're doing at the moment through our council network, that, you know, addressing the lack of police numbers in our town to address the crime. But that's a reactive response to an issue that we need to be part of help fixing before it gets to that stage. You know, like young babies that are born aren't born drug addicts, or you know, they don't have necessarily mental health issues and all that sort of stuff. It's the social network that brings that out in those people. And you know, as a parent, as an owner of a business, as a councillor, I would love to be part of something that would help promote a wellbeing centre in our town. You know, now we've lost the Bennelong's Haven, which I've been there a number of times doing work through business and seeing how well that was operating. We need to make sure that we are going to address these drug, alcohol abuse, domestic violence issues, and I totally agree. But I'm, as a councillor, looking towards our general manager and our directors to come back to us with some ideas. I think a line in the sand right now of saying this is what we're doing isn't probably the best route. I do think that, you know, help us work out where our next step should be that has a great outcome. You know, Councillor Morris's idea of saying about the reports back to council of current bodies that we have out there, we need to get that happening. I'll put it back to you, God.
Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to applaud Councillor Baxter for bringing this forward, because it is an important issue in our community, and even though local government is not under, we don't directly influence health as such, but we have a role to play. I think we all acknowledge that the current system is probably failing a lot of people, but in terms of bringing it into the Breaking the Cycle committee, I feel like it's more directed at reducing crime and reducing antisocial behaviour. Whereas I think, obviously, yes, mental health and antisocial behaviour do go together, but there are a lot of people suffering from mental health issues that don't actually commit crimes, and they're not actually in that antisocial realm. So I think we should be focusing on mental health rather than incorporating the Breaking the Cycle committee with this. Obviously, they have a role, whereas I think this actually should be addressed as a separate issue. Rather than taking a lead facilitator role, I'd probably more like to see council host a meeting of those key members, so state and federal members, Mid-North Coast Local Health District, North Coast Primary Healthcare Network, more representatives from those key areas, and so we can get the people in a room. It's not a public meeting. It's a meeting of experts to say, look, our current system is not working and it's failing people. The resources are there, but there's not a coordinated approach. And I think that would be great if council could take the lead to say, look, something is not working here, let's host a meeting. However, we're not taking the lead, we're not turning into another Department of Health as such. But to see where the conversation goes between these experts, and hopefully it may instigate one of those, you know, levels of government, state government, whether it's even North Coast Healthcare, Primary Health Network, they're actually federal, but get everyone in a room together to start the discussion, say, look, what we're doing at the moment is really not working. So that's probably what I'd like to see. And not be as prescriptive as our original, as your original motion.
Would you be able to change
but along the same
motion,
lines.
Councillor Baxter?
Just on that, can I?
House.
Yeah.
We'll go to the other people first.
Thank you.
Councillor Horval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move an amendment, and I applaud Councillor Baxter for bringing up this notice of motion. It's very timely, but I think we've got to take one step after another, and I think we can wait till December. So that's why I'm moving this amendment. A report on the plan for Kempsey to the December Council for determination on its progress funding expenditure, and how it is dealing with drug abuse and mental health services.
A report from who?
From Kempsey Council. It's asking for a council report. If I can speak to that motion, if I get a seconder, I'll explain why I would like this.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it because I believe that we should be asking.
Councillors, do you think we should go into workshop?
Okay.
Moving to workshop.
Okay, second that. All in favour of moving into workshop? That's carried. We're in workshop.
Well, can I still speak to my amendment, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Well, it's just less form.
I don't think we should be trying to duplicate. A plan for Kempsey, which I presume is a plan for Kempsey Shire, was established in 2015, as Councillor Baxter mentioned, and it's obviously not working. And it is supposed to be dealing with mental health. But as Councillor Morris stated, we haven't had a report back, even though we are a member of the plan for Kempsey, and it's supposed to be dealing with mental health and drug issues, but we're not getting reports. Now, I can tell you that the state government and the federal government put in $10 million towards that in 2015. How has it been spent? Has it been successful? The feedback I've got from people in it is that it hasn't been successful because there's no enforcement. You can't tell a person to go to the mental health unit. They've got to self-nominate unless a doctor's involved. And the issue of suicide is appalling, but we've got to do something about it. But the information is with the experts. We've got the North Coast community health people. What are they doing? We need to ask questions of them because it's their number one responsibility. What are they doing? And just on a side note, Bennelong Haven, as Councillor Patterson talked about, the one thing you've got to remember about Bennelong Haven, all the people there were sent there on court orders. So when you've got enforcement and you get that progress, then you're going to have an improvement. Sadly, Bennelong Haven's closed, and I don't know whether there was a lack of determination by the judiciary around New South Wales to send people there, but it was an issue that was being resolved in the affirmative by having people there. Now, we need to get the information first, and if the plan for Kempsey is not working, we need to know, and then I think we go down to doing something along the lines that Councillor Bax is talking about, facilitate things specifically for the mental health and the drug use in the town. But waiting a month, they might already have things in operation. But they aren't going to tell the general public or council that they have community health dealing with these issues, and if they're not dealing with the issues successfully, we need to know, but we don't get told. And we need to be told. So that's why I'm asking for the report. And if you support it, in December, we will go along the lines of Councillor Baxter. But I just do think the plan for Kempsey, which we have a representative, and I don't know who attends it, these meetings have been going on, the sharing, the facilitation have been going on, but it's a bit of a secret from us as councillors. And I think it shouldn't be a secret. So if council can inquire and get reports back to us by December, well, we'll have more information to go forward. So, Councillor Baxter, I applaud your position, and I fully support it, but I think we need the information first.
Can I make a suggestion in the workshop? It is really complex what's going on. There's a whole range of things happening in the community that council may not even be aware of some of the things. We do have the Breaking the Cycle Committee. Our communications manager, Lyndall Harper, is our representative on that. She's attended 3 meetings in the last 2 years. The last meeting was back in March. So the committee itself isn't meeting that regularly, and that's headed up by the Department of Premier and Cabinet. We've also got the Place Plan, where we work with Family and Community Services. That's actually occurring at the moment, and they are on that Breaking the Cycle Committee as well. The police have just launched It's Not Our Way campaign to deal with drugs as well, and there's a whole range of other things obviously going on across the valley. A possible way forward, the issue of getting a report to council on what's happening is that we may or may not get the information. in terms of accuracy. It doesn't give us a lot of time to actually get that information. Given the number of these are state government departments, they'll have formal processes to go through with that. But I do believe council does need to get the information. A way may be to bring both of those things together. What Councillor Bax and Councillor Sewell were just suggesting is for us to host a meeting, and that be a private meeting or a public meeting, where we can actually have the agencies in the room and all the councillors obviously invited to that, where we can find out what is going on, what's happening, how they're progressing, and subsequent to that, a report come to council with an update on what's actually happening. Yeah. That way you get the information more quickly and you'll get it more directly than a report from us in a meeting, because they will be hesitant about what they put in public. Where if we have a private room, bring them into the committee room here, where they know it's a private meeting, you will get more accurate information, or not necessarily accurate information, you will get more information in terms of the quantum, and then we can provide a report that can be an open and public report following that.
Yeah. Question, Mr. General Manager, through you, Chair. By the way, now you turned that off. I come on again. Thank you. A plan for Kempsey is the title, so at the moment it seems to be not up there. Yeah, it's A plan, capital A. Just technical. This report, Mr. General Manager, would include what you already have, and we'd find out from the attendance and how many times a plan for Kempsey Breaking the Cycle committee has met. Would it be better for us to get a report back in general for December, for February instead of December? And if the report needs to be in confidential, could it come to confidential instead of a public meeting or public part of our meeting?
What I'm suggesting is, and if I can take a liberty to word something, is that council host a meeting of all the concerned parties in relation to mental health and crime and other social issues within the valley.
I'm happy to move an amendment to that effect.
Yeah, and
Mark might be happy to adopt it as his original.
And that subsequent to that, a report be presented to council on an update on what is actually occurring and potential ways forward.
Yeah, Mark, can you change yours to
that?
We're not in open council.
So that's what I intended.
I'm ready to put a foreshadowed motion, but I'd rather you.
Well, yeah, all right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Hosting a meeting.
Seconding the report.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Morris, well, we're not in an open council yet, but
I seconded it because I thought that was leading in the right direction. What's been discussed is what I would like to see, if we can add to that, the General Manager said, that at that meeting or prior to that meeting, that council expresses their concerns with the current metrics for mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, and wants something implemented to improve the situation within our community.
100%.
I think we'd put that in the invitation. You know, it's been raised at the forum here at council, and we are looking for answers and solutions and updates.
So moving forward, we've got a meeting space for that here. We've got all the councillors in attendance. You know, we can hit the nail on the head and then move forward with it.
But that's not acting as a facilitator as such, it's just
that's
a
right.
host. Because a facilitator opens the book.
No.
Because government agencies will just go,
Yeah.
Well, what?
Councillor Saul, just 1 second.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your point exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. If we use the wording in this proposed motion, facilitator, sometimes agencies are happy to pass the buck to council and we're left holding the baby. So I think what you said was correct. We need to not be using that terminology at all. Otherwise we could end up not only costing council dollars, but also in time and effort as well, when we have semi-government agencies has funding and they should be using their dollars instead. One question I wanted to ask, if I may please. With this wellbeing centre, would that come to council as a DA or just be approved under state legislation?
Depends what they do.
And that's if they do it.
Yeah.
If, when and how.
Did you want to speak now or back in open council, or now and both, or what?
Well, just to answer some of those good points there, it's something I forgot to mention before. the feedback I'm getting from people like Dr. Samara up at the hospital there is exactly that, what everybody's just been saying. There's a lot of organisations, there's a lack of coordination. The idea of, it all started with the idea of should we build a drug and rehab centre to replace Bennelong Haven? Dr. Samara said, no, you need a day clinic, you need something client friendly. It's a matter of changing the structure. The structure's not working at the moment. So to change the structure so that people will walk in and people will feel free to talk about their mental health problems, and the structure is more client friendly, and we take in more of these people. And so it's messy, I agree. So you're right, a meeting of all the experts who could then say, okay, well, let's try this new structure. And to come back to Councillor Morris's point, I agree with you about crossing over into the breaking the cycle mandate, but taking the mental health issue out of their list, out of their subset, and throwing some light on that, because you're quite right. It's a serious problem, not just for people that are breaking the law. It's a serious problem for people right across our society, and unfortunately, the structure's not efficient at the moment. It's not working at the moment. So I totally accept the suggestions about hosting a meeting. I think it's a great idea. Anything that's going to address the problem, I think it's a great idea.
Let's just read out the first part of our vision, which I'm sure you all know. We live in a community that provides opportunity to all to prosper in an environment that supports well-being. Your values are healthy, wealthy, being safe and being connected. So I think just simply the way I read this is we would host a single meeting, and we would then get back information from that to council, but at that meeting or invitation to that meeting would make it clear to those involved, the agencies and the not-for-profits who are involved in that, that we are looking for some updates and for some answers about what's actually going on, because we are concerned that what's happening at the moment isn't working.
And some realistic coordination between the various agencies.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the Premier's Department's supposed to be doing.
Okay, hold on 1 second, Councillor Patterson.
Just sort of comment on it. I mean, before I was elected into council, I was a member of community safety meeting organisations. Myself and the Mayor went around to a lot of community places all over the MACLEAY and met with the public, and the public have been dealing with the outcomes of not dealing with mental and drug abuse and all those social issues. So, to move forward, because as now an elected councillor, I'm sitting here thinking I'm feeling helpless that we can't help those people that are victims of these issues. So, we take the look of, let's help those people before they become victims. That's a much better way to do it, and to facilitate that meeting, and then to follow it on. And that will be our challenge, because the community catch-up type things that we're having now, I sort of think it was a little bit of an extension now of what we started many years ago with talking about the issues of crime in the community, because it is an issue.
Can I just give you a terrifying statistic to support what you just said, Councillor? In the research I've been looking at, 50% of the people in prison present with a mental health disorder. 50%. And the second terrifying statistic is 1 in 5. 1 in 5 of those people with a mental disorder actually get help while they're in prison. So you did right. It's a sleeper.
Okay. So Councillor McGinn moves that we go back into council. Open council. Seconder. Councillor Saul second. All in favour? Aye. We're back in open council. The original amendment, the seconder withdrew their support.
My amendment.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, well, I'd still like to have a vote on that, even if it gets voted down. I'd like a vote on that.
Okay, well, it's lost its seconder.
No, once it's seconded, it can't be then undone. It's
It was seconded by Councillor Morris and he's withdrawn his support.
No, it still needs to be actually.
So it still needs to be debated, okay. Okay, no worries. You can speak to that.
Yes, I listened to all of you and you're all on track with there's a major issue here. But I'm still thinking we have a plan for Kempsey and it doesn't seem to be working, and I would ask that we get a report back in December. General Manager doesn't think of making it February would be any better, but we should go ahead with getting that report and see the information on where the money's been spent and what's going to happen with it. So I ask you to support my amendment, and then we can move new resolutions if necessary at the December meeting to this report.
So that's the amendment. We will vote on that amendment. All in favour of the amendment? All against? That is lost. Now we go back to the original motion. Or the amended original motion, which is morphed into this. Would you like to close debate? Or does anybody like to speak against it?
Yes, I'd simply like to recommend the councillors support this motion and host, as the General Manager said, hosting all of the involved parties in the valley to address the issues before us would be a wonderful first step. So I recommend.
Can I just ask a question?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Has it been for and against since? It hasn't been. So therefore, has it been? Yeah. Because we were in.
Ask the question.
The only reason I want to ask the question is I see that the majority of the parties that should be attending this meeting should be those that have membership of the Breaking the Cycle Committee. So I would like to suggest that we possibly put in there that the members of the Breaking the Cycle Committee and other concerned parties, because there may be other private operators that are not part of that Breaking the Cycle Committee. So I'd like to make sure that we get all those state and federal government.
Yeah, it actually says all concerned, so we were actually not looking at just breaking the cycle, we were looking at all concerned.
Yeah, I'm looking at breaking the cycle
plus, so are we. Yeah, that's why the wording is all concerned. It's beyond breaking the cycle.
Okay.
Some people in breaking the cycle, they're not concerned with that.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. We'll put the motion. All in favour? That's carried. Unanimous. We'll move on to 15.2, Councillors, 6 Crescent Head Road Interchange Letter of Request.
Thank you.
Councillor Hall obviously moves it. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Morris?
The heading for this is Crescent Head Road Interchange Letter of Request. And the recommendation is that the local member, Mrs Melinda Pavey, MP, member for Oxley, be forwarded a written request, a letter, to use her best endeavours to have the Road and Maritime Services, RMS, undertake the installation of interchange on Crescent Head Road with the A1 Pacific Highway. Council and the community should be informed of any reply as soon as it is received. And 3, if there's a negative response, Council is to be provided with a separate report with recommendations for determination of any further action. After this motion that is similar, but it's not exactly the same, was not seconded at the last council meeting in October, I spoke to 4 different councillors and they seem to have misinformation. The first person said the motion is an application for a grant. No, it isn't. It's a letter. 2, installing an interchange would have a negative impact on the central Kempsey economy. No, it wouldn't. People travelling to Crescent Head would be looking to get a coffee when they arrive, not when they come down Kempsey Central Street. They want some food, they've got the interchange at South Kempsey. That won't bring, by having an interchange at Crescent Head Road, it will not, of course, give more people coming into Kempsey to buy drinks and things. Number 3, I was amazed at this. The motion would cause too much work for Melinda Pavey. She's already a great supporter of Kempsey Council, and if we send her a letter, she will pass it on to the people that work for her, and it will be dealt with. Finally, there are more pressing needs in the Shire for funding than this interchange. The response to that is very simple. We aren't asking to spend any council money. We want the RMS to spend their money. And that's what the letter would be going with. It's pretty obvious to me that the interchange would work and help. I would hope that all of you have read the attachment which talks about the traffic analysis, the saving of time and distance. That's for one vehicle. At Crescent Head in December and January, there's 5,000 people living out there. We would be improving the access to going north or south by up to 10 kilometres on each trip. So it's 20 kilometres less they've got to travel. 20 kilometres they will arrive maybe tired, but not as tired as they would if they had to keep driving. So the interchange is a good move. We're just asking, my opinion, it should be yours if you read the analysis, that it's going to be a benefit for the people on Crescent Head Road and Crescent Head. It's a letter of request, and that's all it is. And I'm pretty sure that the General Manager would be able to write this letter very quickly, or get one of his staff to do it. And it goes to Melinda Pavey, and it's got the attachments. They can look at it. As you would know, when Rudders Lagoon goes over, and it did happen in March this year, the 500 students at the Seventh-day Adventist School were blocked in. Luckily, they managed to get them out on the backs of trucks and so forth, but cars couldn't get in, buses couldn't get in until the water went down, and that's a concern. And then I've got feedback from the executive of SDA that the interchange would certainly help them in case of huge downpours and getting children out. Again, it's a letter asking the RMS to look at it. They'll probably come back and say no, but we're standing up for our community. We're standing up from the Crescent Head and Crescent Head Road community, which is nearly 1,800. And when you compare it with all the interchanges north of Coffs Harbour, some of them have got caravan parks, but very few of them would go to 5,000 in December.
You have 30 seconds left.
And January.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm asking you to just support the fact that we're going to write a letter, and that's all it is, asking for RMS to examine it. It's beyond me why anyone would think that this is not a simple thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Baxter.
I'd like to speak against the idea, in the sense that the point about Melinda Pavey is we've got a list, we've got a priority list of what we want out of the state government. If we swamp the state government or the RMS or wherever the money's coming from with too many requests, what I'm saying is that there are vastly more important things, I think, to get money for than this saving a couple of minutes for a driver who's going to come off the expressway at the roundabout. And as far as the Seventh-day Adventist School, $2 million could raise that road, Rudders, the half kilometre of Rudders Lagoon that floods, from a government grant. If we ask Melinda for that, I just think there's more important priorities, Councillor Horville, as far as what we've been talking about. Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
I'd just like to move a foreshadowed motion, which means in the event that this gets voted down, that we consider it, and that is that Council receives Council investigate the options to raise the road in the vicinity of Rudders Lagoon to provide a higher degree of flood immunity.
Councillors. Okay, let's... So we have a foreshadowed motion. Do I have a seconder? Oh, you don't need a seconder, sorry. That's right. So, I just want to say something about the notice of motion as well, is I have concerns about the negative impact it'll have on the businesses that are currently on the current interchange, and also the land that we've just sent away to try and get gateway determination. If there was to be another interchange a kilometre down the road, what would that send to those people? Well, sorry, 3.8, I stand corrected. It might be 10 centimetres more even. But it also then will affect the new industrial area that's currently on that area as well, because it'll be closer to our current industrial area. So there's big concerns about that for my liking. And we could potentially lose a lot of investment from those two facilities at the moment. So I couldn't support that on that basis, but I would support a foreshadow. Right of reply, Councillor Hall.
No one else to speak. Could I put that plan up that I emailed through, please? On Friday I received this plan of the interchange that has been designed for the interchange, and you can see from the green bits that would be the land acquisition would have to go on. But I'm asking you to think of the very big picture, that we are trying to improve Crescent Head Road and Crescent Head people access to the freeway. At the moment they've got to travel up to 10 kilometres further, and cumulatively, I know that's a bit hard to understand, cumulatively we've got thousands of vehicles having to go that extra distance. And when you add up the cost to the environment of all that extra fuel being expended to go that little distance, because you expend a lot more fuel when you have to go down to 50 kilometres an hour and so forth, and 40 in school zones, it's certainly going to be a cost to the environment. But I don't think you should prejudge what RMS are going to say. I think we should send the letter and let them, who are the experts, make the decision.
Okay, councillors, we put the motion. All in favour? All against? It's lost. We have a foreshadowed motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Morris, would you like to speak?
We really do have a disconnect. When there is a minor flood, and it happens with a minor flood, that particular section of road gets blocked off on numerous occasions. I know it hasn't for the last 12 months or so, but in past years there's been 5 or 6 times a year. And the people from Crescent Head cannot get into Kempsey to go to work. We raised the corduroy a small amount a few years ago. It's time that we really investigated and looked at the feasibility of improving the flood immunity so that the children that go to the Kempsey Adventist School can get in and out in time of flood, and so that the residents of Crescent Head have greater security for getting to and from work when there is a minor flood.
Anybody against?
I'd like the opportunity to speak. I'm not so much against this, because I mean obviously we see a need, and the need is that, you know, there's a blocking off at Rudders Lagoon, but are there not also similar needs around the whole Shire where there are low-lying bridges and people are cut off, and parts of the highway, or I don't know, but what I'm trying to say is, we've just identified one area, and so now we've gone off on a tangent saying we've got to have a solution for this one area. Yet we need to bring ourselves back to our strategy for our Shire as a whole. And taking one issue because it's highlighted today is not really the best strategic approach. So I'm not saying that this is not a worthy project or a worthy item to investigate options of, but is it our priority flood mitigation job when put in context of our shire as a whole and every time we flood. So I can't really vote for this on the basis, not that it's unimportant, not important thing, but that we need to come back to our strategy of spending our limited resources across the whole of the shire for the best interest of the whole of the community. And I think we've just highlighted one problem and we're running with it, and I don't think that's the best strategy to make decisions on the run. I mean, this is a good discussion, but it's come on the basis of an overpass discussion which should have been made 10 years ago when the RMS was designing the highway, and now we've gone down a rabbit hole to investigate throwing money at a piece of road which may or may not be a priority spend for us. And on that basis, because it isn't considered as a whole, you know, across the shire as a whole, and where we can spend limited funds on our roads for flood mitigation works, I just can't back it. I'm sorry.
General Manager.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. There's 2 points I wanted to raise. Councillor McGinn's actually just raised. The first one, where does it sit on our priorities? The second one is if Council is of a mind to move and resolve this way, if it's to be a report to come back to Council which gives you information about the, I can tell you today, yes, you can do it physically. You know, it's a matter of putting a heap of stuff in there, packing it down, building it up. But if it's to actually look at what the environmental constraints of that may be and potential impacts, if it's to actually provide costings and that, you'll need to allocate a budget to this, because we will have to reallocate staffing or get consultants to do it.
Just 1 second, I've got Councillor Saul had his lot on.
I just wanted to suggest a change to the foreshadowed or the motion that is there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
1 sec.
I agree with Councillor McGinn. We're going to have to go around and change our roads priority to do such works. Our shire does flood, we acknowledge that, and people have to make do when it does. So I think to support this would mean a whole reallocation of resources, which we've also itemised for our previous future budgets, must be changed, because this wouldn't be cheap, and for $2 million to come off something else, I think that we've already planned for, could be a major backward step.
Councillor Morris, your...
I'd just like to emphasise the fact that this is not suggesting that we do the work, it's suggesting that we investigate the work. But that aside, after the comments, what I'd like to do with the support of the seconder is to vary it to say that Council considers including the investigation of the options to raise the road in vicinity of Rudders Lagoon as a part of the development of the next operating plan.
I agree with that. And that is sensible, and it's put in as part of our plan.
So does the seconder agree with that?
Very good compromise.
So you agree with it?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Councillor Horval?
So, I'm speaking against it. I was going to speak and support Councillor McGinn, but she's now gone with this. It seems we're going to be swamping the state government with grant applications, and we don't want to do that and make them have to do extra work. I'm just quoting Councillor Baxter back to himself. This plan would cost Kempsey Council money because most grants are dollar for dollar or something.
There's nothing to do with grant funding in that there. We're investigating.
It might come up with grant funding. That's what I'm making a point of, Mr. Chair.
Well, it might, but we'll let the staff decide that and not debate it here today.
Well, I'm speaking against this idea of getting money out of the state government, which may be a suggestion from staff. And raising that road is going to be a great cost, and it could be a long way off if we put it in the next operating plan for that to happen. So the point I'm making is we don't want to add to the cost of all the other things that are happening in the Shire. We had a chance, and you voted against it, of getting the state government to spend the money to resolve the situation. Here we're now going to resolve to spend our own money on it.
Councillor Patterson.
Thanks. Councillor Morris, so I'm just working out that last response. Councillor Morris, I was just wondering whether you would change your alternate motion a bit to that we put this on the unfunded works list to investigate, because that's how...
Put it on the unfunded works list until we know whether it's viable and roughly what the cost is.
Hang on. That's exactly what, if Council remembers how we got through the South Street Paper Road, started on the unfunded list, went on to get government grant for it, then it happened. I mean, we've got Belgrave Street that gets cut off, we've got South Street, we've got...
But that's what this is about, Anthony.
This is looking to put it in there.
To what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're saying, is that.
Yeah, but surely our directors would be doing this anyway.
Well, probably.
What this, through you, Mr. Chair, what this, the way I read it in terms of the direction to the staff is that when we bring the discussion to council early next year in relation to the 1920 budget and works program, one of the items will be funding that would be provided potentially to investigate these options. And also it would probably, for us, what we'd be doing with that is trying to put that in the context of where does this road sit in our priority list of flooded roads and impacts.
Yep. Yep.
Councillor Morris, would you like to close debate? No? Okay. I put the motion. All in favour? All against? That's carried. We'll move on to 15.3, investigating a heritage maintenance committee. Obviously, Councillor Hall will move it. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Morrow or Councillor Saul? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the moment, we've got a, as the General Manager has pointed out in his comments, we are getting a report back in December on possible committees, and at the December meeting. This is just adding another one that could be considered by staff. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I hope you have read some of the background issues where, for whatever reason, staff have not restored historical signs and plaques, then there should be a procedure within council to deal with that, and by involving the MACLEAY Historical Society, they certainly would have input into, by having a committee with them meeting possibly twice a year, that our heritage would be protected. So I think it's a pretty straightforward motion. I ask you to support it.
Is there any debate? No debate. I put the motion. All in favour? All against? It is carried.
So it's a separate report on that particular item. Yep.
Yes. Item 16.1, Local New South Wales Conference Delegate Report.
Thank you. I'd like to move that, but I'd like to move it as an amendment. A varied motion. I'm corrected, thank you. And I'm sending it right through straight away. I should have done this earlier. And the amendment has got 8 points in it. And I had better read them out.
Yep.
Amended conference report, that the report be noted, especially in regards to the conference announcement by the local government New South Wales President Linda Scott on waste. Point 2, that council endorses local government New South Wales campaign Save Our Recycling to realise the reinvestment of 100% of the waste levy collected each year by the New South Wales government in waste minimisation, recycling and resource recovery. Point 3, that council makes representation to the state member for Oxley, the Honourable Melinda Pavey MP, Minister for Roads, Maritime and Freight, in support of this campaign objective for the New South Wales Government to commit to reinvest 100% of the waste levy and waste minimisation, recycling and resource recovery. Point 4, that council write to the Premier, the Honourable Gladys Berejiklian MP, the Opposition Leader, the Honourable Michael Daly MP, the Minister for Local Government, and the Minister for the Environment, the Honourable Gabriel Upton MP, and the Shadow Minister for the Environment and Heritage, Penny Sharp MLC, seeking bipartisan support for the 100% reinvestment of the waste levy collected each year into waste minimisation, recycling and resource recovery. Point 5, that Council take a lead role in activating the local government New South Wales Save Our Recycling campaign locally. Point 6, that Council endorse the distribution and display of the local government New South Wales Save Our Recycling information on Council premises, as well as involvement in any other actions arising from the initiative. Point 7, that Council formally advise local government New South Wales that Council has endorsed the Save Our Recycling advocacy initiative. And finally, 8, that Council proactively works with commercial waste, recycling and reprocessing operators to seek the establishment of waste recycling facilities in the Kempsey local government area. I move this with all the extra bits in because the announcement yesterday that Cessnock City Council has adapted all these, and we need to be on the front foot. They were the first council in New South Wales to adopt all these points. It's been adapted so it represents our local council and our local members, but it's a pretty straightforward thing. The announcement at the local government conference of this initiative by Linda Scott was quite empowering, and the facts are that we get so little of our waste funding coming back to us when we have to pay the levy, the waste levy. We should be doing something to get the system fixed so that that waste levy goes back into those areas which will benefit it. At the moment, most of it goes into consolidated revenue. So I think it's a straightforward report. We'll be on top of what's happening. The suggestion was that this be a mayoral minute, but if we wait till December the 20th, the people preparing for the next election, would have already got their policies in place. We want Kempsey Shire Council to have an input to that policy development, and one of the policy developments for all parties might be to promise 100% refunding. Now, if we get in now, we're going to be getting those parties that hope to get elected at the March election to come on board with this initiative put out by local government New South Wales at the annual conference. So I ask you to support it.
Seconded by Councillor Morris. GM.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly points 2 to 8 are word for word from the from New South Wales local government, and it certainly was the Mayor's intention to put this up at the December meeting as her mayoral or one of her mayoral minutes. She spoke to me about that before she left. She didn't have time to actually get it done, obviously, for this meeting, and it was her intention to do it. So yeah, from a staffing point of view, it's supporting a statewide campaign.
Any debate? I put the motion. All in favour? That's carried unanimously.
Any questions on the lovely photos in my report? No? Thank you.
So we will now move to councillor questions. Councillor Patterson. Councillor McGinn. No questions. Councillor Horville.
I've just emailed them through. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm still a bit technology challenged with this microphone. The questions I notice. Number 1, what financial contributions, including staff time, was made by Kempsey Shire Council to the Red Cedar Festival held on Saturday, 17th of November? Second question, has there been any progress in seeking the owners removing the derelict vehicles in the compound in the middle of Smithtown, as requested at the Smithtown Gladstone Community Catch-Up? And I've misspelled catch in catch-up meeting. With regard to the Kempsey Airport at Ulladulla, what has been the income and expenditure for 2015-2016, 2016-2017, 2017-2018, And what is the projected income and expenditure for 2018-2019? Fourth question, to complement the Armidale Regional Councillors' work inspection undertaken earlier this year, will councillors be invited to the inspection of Kempsey Armidale Road by the Minister in January 2019 so as to be aware of the issues of upgrading the road to regional road status? Final question, with reference to the small cruise ship visit in October to Trial Bay and the difficulty of landing passengers because of Back Creek blockages, I should have written, Back Creek blockages, is there or will there be an assessment of approving the silting over of the entrance?
I don't normally respond to questions, but just in relation to that, so it doesn't get out into the public, there were no difficulties in actually landing people with a small cruise ship. They were never going into Back Creek. They were always landing on the beach. That's how it's actually designed with that particular cruise ship. So it's not actually an issue of Back Creek at all. That's where they were always landing.
Yeah, well, I was asking that question because if the waves come up, the cruise ship comes in and can't land them, Mr. General Manager, and that's why I've asked the question. If in the future we've got regular visits, and we do have regular visits, we need to have Back Creek accessible in the higher waves.
Yeah, that cruise ship, the way it operates, looks at alternate sites. It's got 2 alternate sites. Councillors already written to the local member and Minister for RMS seeking a case study, not a case study, a business case, funding for a business case to provide a floating pontoon over at Trial Bay that will allow that boat and others with tenders, which are larger boats, to actually be able to come in there at Trial Bay. So council staff are already onto that.
Councillor Saul, oh sorry, you finished? Councillor?
Yes, but that answer will be as Councillor, Mr. General Manager has already given us. Yes, my mistake in writing it was instead of because of Back Creek, it's because at Back Creek.
Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question, please. Why did Council bitumen pave the footpath outside of 35 Gladstone Street, Kempsey, and not just simply re-concrete? I can't remember. Well, has it been done? Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Councillor Morris.
A couple of questions. There's been some comments on social media in regard to the artwork at the interchanges and it being grant funded. Can the source of funding please be clarified, and can the total cost for the 2 sculptures be indicated to the community? The return and earn scheme requires, or has council entered into an agreement with the materials recovery facility for money to be returned to council as a part of the return and earn scheme? If not, can that be done prior to the deadline of the 1st of December this year? If it has been done, what money has been returned to council as a result of that action? At the Stewart's Point annual general meeting, there was an undertaking given by our local member to the community that council would provide a community briefing within 1 month in relation to the Stewart's Point sewerage. Has this briefing been scheduled as yet? And if not, when is it likely to occur? Can
I answer that now? Yeah. We'll put it in the minute. Yeah. We are working on it actually at our briefing with the councillors, which is next week. It's been brought forward a week for our normal briefing. We want to brief councillors first before we take it to the public. So we'll be giving you an update on Stewart's Point next week.
And I suppose a further question on that is, will council review the sewerage charges for the Stewart's Point community, given the 12-month or slightly over 12-month delay in the progress of the project?
Yes.
No. Okay. It's now time for confidential. We need a motion. I move that we move into confidential. Councillor Shields, seconded by Councillor Saul. All in favour of confidential? Aye. It's carried. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today.
Sent it out, the invite out about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
About a week ago.
Yeah.
I will be an apology there. I'll be at Melville High School.
It's on the 28th.
I'll be at the Girls Academy. Girls Academy Awards.
Next Wednesday at 4:30. So normal time, we just brought it forward 1 week because everything else was on. Because we had the Willa Warren community catch up on the Wednesday.
I could be here for a little bit, and then I'll go.
Yeah, see how you go. Yeah. I was just getting sorted just to let you know, we'll be looking, just giving you an update on, and we'll provide, if we do presentations, we'll give you this anyway. But we're looking at an update on the second bridge, the Clyde Street plan, Stewart Point's STP, the council report layout, and we're going to give you more update on the cruise ships. So.
Given that there are a few people who have indicated now that they're not available on that day, can a written update be provided or a recording be provided?
Yeah, we might look at the recording. Yeah, give you an idea. Yeah, not a bad idea. So.
Okay, video's off.
Video's off. No, it's not. Just wait for 15 seconds.